Very special good morning to you from the Newsroom team. Yes, it's just gone 9 o'clock. We'll be with you until midday today. And today we focus on school uniform, its significance, and whether or not it's become a relic of the past. Yes, we're conducting a poll on many parents that have to deal with the exorbitant costs of basic school requirements such as uniforms and stationery, Elvis, which can run into thousands of rands.
Well, parents are complaining here, but I can tell you that because it cost an arm, a leg, and even a foot as well. So we're asking the question on the poll, are school uniforms becoming unaffordable for you, the parent? Now, so far, quite a lot of people coming in, 139 votes in. 81% of you are saying, yes, it is unaffordable.
Extortion, some call it, Elvis. They say that they are forced to buy at certain schools, and the prices of school uniforms are often well inflated above the price that you're supposed to pay.
Yeah, because now what happens is that it looks like there's a collusion between the school and the service provider. So you can only buy from one service provider. You cannot go to Pep Store and buy your school shirt and school pants.
We've asked a couple of school principals to come in, but they refused. Let's take some of your views. Michael Nditra says, uniform is unaffordable for everyone unless you don't know where, when and how to buy them, he says. Well, in some cases, obviously, you have to go to a certain place.
Yes, now Desmond Moodley says the problem arises when the schools force you to buy from certain suppliers. That's what we just talked about right now. But you can get it cheaper elsewhere, and that's exactly what it comes down to.
Extortion. That's what the Competition Commission is actually looking at. We'll be talking to the Competition Commission shortly about this. Now, Lerato says uniform is affordable depending on where and when you buy it. You can get shoes, 70 Rand, socks, 10 Rand, short sleeve shirts, 30 Rand. Yes, but those prices, Lerato, are often inflated when they put the school's badge on and they force you to buy it at a certain shop. That's part of the problem.
There you have it, 110 Rand, Lerato combined that cost for us, but you will pay probably close to 1,000 Rand.
You cannot buy a school shirt for 110 Rand with a logo on it, and that's the reality now. Today we go further. As we always go here on the Newsroom show, we like to push the envelope a little bit. We want to know from you, why is the school uniform then still necessary in the modern day South Africa, considering our colonial and apartheid past, Elvis? One can't really find a way. Why is it necessary? I can't personally.
A lot of people would tell you that it's a unifying factor for the school children. It's also perhaps an identifier, so they know that this one is from that school and so forth. But there's a number of people that we're going to talk to today that might be able to tell us differently.
Absolutely. What I can say, I've been fortunate to go to school elsewhere in the world where there were no uniforms. All the best education systems in the world, they don't have uniforms. Children are not oppressed and forced to behave in a militaristic kind of way. And if you're forced to do that in your teens, you kind of act up a little bit, don't you? Be a little bit more relaxed, I say, South Africa. It's time for us to put the uniform to bed.
Well, others would say that that would only happen when you have the money to pay for it in private schools, for instance, where you can go with your own school, with your own clothes instead of your
uniform. We'll talk about that. Are we being extorted with uniforms? Why are they so expensive? Tell us what you think, guys. Send us some questions that we can ask the Competition Commission. We've got a whole host of stakeholders, including a psychologist, throughout the next 3 hours to put us in the loop on this very emotive and difficult subject. But first, let's get the morning's news.
Lawyers have concurred that searches without a warrant under the Financial Intelligence Center Amendment Bill, the FICA bill, are not unconstitutional. ANC Secretary General Gwede Mantashe says the biggest challenge facing South Africa is low economic growth and potential massive job losses as a consequence. And the Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto has condemned the U.S. President Donald Trump's orders to build a wall along the U.S.-Mexican border. Well, there you have it, all trumped up for you this morning. But first, before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports field, and it seems to be very exciting news on the tennis court there, Kendall.
100%, Elvis. I think it's something that everybody's going to celebrate, the fact that we've got the Williams sisters in the final at the Australian Open.
Are they in the final? Has Serena won a game already?
6-2, 6-1.
Oh, bloodbath. They're wonderful. The Williams sisters turning back the clock. Isn't that a wonderful story?
One way. The evergreen Williams sisters doing fantastic stuff out of the Australian Open. Good morning to you. Before we get into that, let's bring you a bit more of what else is happening in the world of sports.
Mohamed Salah.
Egypt and Ghana advance to the African Cup of Nations quarterfinals as a brilliant Mohamed Salah free kick wrong-foots Ghana's keeper, giving Egypt a group-topping victory.
She's done it! Venus Williams is through to her second Australian Open final.
36-year-old Venus Williams reaches her first Grand Slam final since Wimbledon 2009 by beating Coco van der Weijg 6-7, 6-2, 6-3.
Major singles final for her, and she is delighted.
And sprint legend Usain Bolt loses one of his 9 Olympic gold medals after Jamaican teammate Nesta Carter is found guilty of doping at the 2008 Olympic Games. And of course, we now know that Venus and Serena Williams will be playing in that Australian Open final come the weekend after she beat her opponent Mirjana Lucic Baroni 6-2, 6-1. More about all of that a little later in the Sports Bulletin. For now, it's back to Elvis, who's got the news.
Williams sisters in the finals. Wonderful news there from the tennis court from Kendall. He'll be back a little bit later to tell you more. But our top story this morning, Parliament's Standing Committee of Finance has heard varying differences of opinion on the Financial Intelligence Centre Amendment Bill, or the FICA bill as it's known. Legal opinions from Parliament and the National Treasury dispute that the bill is unconstitutional. However, the Black Business Council and the Progressive Professionals Forum disagree. The bill is aimed at fighting money laundering, corruption and the funding of terrorism. It was approved by both houses of Parliament and sent to President Jacob Zuma to sign into law, but the President sent it back with certain reservations, especially about the constitutionality of searches without a warrant. The Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution, CASAC, took the matter to the Constitutional Court, trying to force the President, Jacob Zuma, to sign the FICA bill or refer it back to Parliament if he had some reservations. The committee will now meet again next week for further deliberations. The biggest challenge facing the country is the low economic growth and potential massive job losses as a consequence. Now, this is according to the ANC Secretary-General Gwede Mantashe. He was speaking at the ANC Lekgotla, which began in Pretoria yesterday. Mantashe says the Lekgotla comes at a time when the country recorded the slowest growth in the economy, but avoided being downgraded to junk status. He says the ANC government must strive to grow the economy in order to overcome some of these challenges. This is the last ANC Lekgotla under the current leadership of President Jacob Zuma, as the party braces itself to elect new leadership in December.
We are appealing to the committee to say, tell us concrete things that should be done. Policies are there, they've been refined, revisited, clear, but what can we do to grow the economy? That's why we'll say that when you give you the briefing at the end of the Lekgotla, which is going to be 2 days, we'll be talking a lot to mining, we'll be talking a lot to agriculture, we'll be talking a lot to manufacturing, we'll be talking a lot to the fourth economic revolution, which is innovation, being at the cutting edge of economic growth. That is on the economic side, that is the issue that we're going to be dealing with. We'll be talking to land reform and land redistribution, the importance of access to land.
The Gambia's new president, Adama Barrow, will return to his country's capital later today. It will bring an end to a prolonged political crisis sparked by disputed elections that forced him to flee to neighboring Senegal. The United Nations Security Council has meanwhile received a closed-door briefing from the Secretary-General's envoy to West Africa. Diplomats praised the collective international effort that eventually saw the departure of the former president Yahya Jammeh.
The council met to discuss the situation on the ground, but diplomats here are well chuffed with their efforts in the eventual peaceful handover of power.
the leadership of ECOWAS, the regional organization, for this excellent example of preventive diplomacy.
Former President Jammeh left the country on Saturday for Equatorial Guinea, which is not a party to the International Criminal Court, while it remains unclear if the new authorities, once installed in Banjul, will pursue charges against Jammeh over allegations that he raided state coffers before departing the country.
What we see in Gambia, let's always be cautious about the outcome, but frankly, it is preventive diplomacy at its best.
Ambassador, many people would argue that it wasn't diplomacy that worked in the Gambia, but was the threat of military intervention. Is that now going to set a precedent for future crises that may develop, similar to what happened in the Gambia?
That's a good point. I believe diplomacy is always stronger when it is backed up by a form of pressure.
ECOWAS troops remain in the Gambia, securing the capital for the safe return of the president. Bryce Pease, SABC News, New York.
The outgoing chairperson of the African Union Commission, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, has called on African leaders to take charge of their destiny and unity. She was addressing the 30th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union in Ethiopia.
The world feels more insecure as violent extremism of all kinds, acts of terrorism and international crime impact on security. This with no country that is exempt. The AU Commission Chair says, coupled with this are economic insecurity and climate change, which also take their toll.
Whilst on the surface, there is no global arms race, expenditure on arms are skyrocketing. With the proliferation of arms in the hands of states and increasingly non-state actors, this poses threats to global, national and regional stability and insecurity alike.
This is the global context in which Africa has to navigate its continental agenda.
It requires that we revive and strengthen the spirit of Pan-Africanism, unity and solidarity. It means we have to guard our unity jealously and not to allow ourselves to be divided or diverted from our agenda.
Issues such as good governance, democracy, peace and security are ranked high within Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030 with a clear linkage to development. The revitalization of the Africa Peer Review Mechanism should also help in this regard. Lehana Tsoteti, SABC News, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Meanwhile, the U.S. President Donald Trump has ordered the construction of a U.S.-Mexican border wall and punishment for cities shielding illegal immigrants. Less than a week into his presidency, Trump has moved aggressively to put his stamp on a range of directives. It signals tough action towards the roughly 11 million illegal immigrants already in the United States, most from Latin America, whom he already has threatened to deport. The U.S. leader instructed officials to begin to plan, design and construct a physical wall along the southern border and see how it could be funded. A draft executive order will meanwhile block the entry of refugees from war-torn Syria. It will also suspend the entry of any immigrants from Muslim-majority, Middle Eastern and various African countries. Now, if you talk about a president, that will set a precedent. There you have it, Donald Trump. But right now, today, we're focusing on school uniforms here in South Africa, and that's why we are conducting a poll. We want to find out from you, are school uniforms becoming unaffordable for parents? Let's take a look at what you have to say on the poll. 157 votes in. So far, 81% of you are saying yes, 19% are saying no. Hashtag school uniforms. Let us know what's on your mind. You can participate. You can also tweet us on the subject. But Eben, we're also running a running a question rather, but we got some tweets on the subject, right?
Yeah, we ask a question, Elvis. So often we have to deal with a difficult question. This is one. that, well, we think that it's about time we ask this question to our educators, to our Department of Education. Why is the school uniform still necessary in modern-day South Africa? That's what we want you to tell us. Why is it still necessary? Elsewhere in the world, children can go to school without uniforms, and it's not a problem. Parents are not being held ransom by unscrupulous monopolies and cartels to pay exorbitant money for uniforms. Mthokozisi says the uniform brings equality between the haves and the have-nots. That's what we are being told. But is that really the case? We'll talk about that a little bit later. Michael Jambase says, Newsroom, school uniforms. Some parents can't afford. Government must ban school uniforms in schools. Students must wear casual clothes. That's Michael's considered view. Christian Kleinant says, I couldn't agree more. School uniforms deny kids individuality and turns them into military-style cannon fodder. No cost saving, says Christian Kleinant. Is it a legacy of colonialism, this uniform thing? What do you think about it? Tell us what you think. Is it maybe a legacy of apartheid? Is it a way for us to suppress our children? These are the questions that we need to answer going forward. In other countries, some of the best education systems in the world, there are no school uniforms and the kids get along just fine. Now, January is the month that schools open, and usually quite stressful for most parents, as they have to deal with the exorbitant cost of basic school requirements such as uniforms and stationery, which can often run into thousands and thousands of rands. Now, the Competition Commission of South Africa is investigating South African school uniform monopolies that allegedly overcharge and force parents, you and me, to buy from only certain suppliers. The Commission's probe into the 10 billion rand industry comes amid allegations that senior school executives get paid for exclusive supplier contracts. Yes, the little backhander that we know. The Commission will visit schools and other stakeholders as part of their fact-finding mission on this. Now, from the Competition Commission's Enforcement and Exemptions Department, we are joined by Itumeleng Lesofie. A very good morning to you, Itumeleng. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Itumeleng, just give us a quick idea. What are you guys looking at the Competition Commission? What are you probing? And more importantly, what have you found since your investigations have started?
Perhaps as a point of departure, I should mention that the Competition Commission does not question the school's entitlement, or rather right, to prescribe school uniform. Our concern is really in relation to the procurement side of schooling. So as the Competition Commission, we have received a number of complaints from various stakeholders, in particular parents. Most of these concerns are really in relation to what seems to be arrangements that schools conclude with specific suppliers. So the concern here is that once a parent has registered a school at his child or her child at a particular school, the parent is required to buy school uniform from a particular prescribed supplier. So the Commission has received a number of these complaints from a number of years until recently. So currently we are sitting at more than 10 formal and informal complaints. And I mean, preliminary investigations that have been conducted thus far show that there are indeed exclusive agreements that are concluded between schools and certain suppliers. To give an example, there is a supplier in the Western Cape that has exclusive supply agreements with more than 60 schools in a particular region in the Western Cape. And what concerns us is that some of these agreements are of indefinite duration. In other words, they don't have termination clauses. Now, what this does is that exclusive agreements of that nature eliminate competition. And we know that when there is no competition between suppliers, the designated or appointed supplier tends to take advantage and charge inflated or rather high prices, which is really the main concern from parents.
When you talk about inflated prices, give us an idea of how much these prices can be inflated when there's no competition, as you just pointed out.
Well, once a particular company has been made a monopoly supplier, it means that that particular company can charge as high price as it wishes, as opposed to when there is competition in the market. So when there is competition in the market, parents or consumers would have what we call consumer choice. And that would serve as a means to discipline suppliers. In other words, if you are a consumer and you are able to compare prices and buy where you feel that the price is affordable, that form of competition tends to bring prices down, as opposed to when there is no competition at all in markets.
What are some of the other complaints that you've found from parents with regards to this?
Well, as I've indicated, the main concern is really about parents being made to pay exorbitant prices for school uniform. And it appears that the main source of this concern is the exclusive agreements that are concluded between schools and suppliers. I should point out that we have been working very close with the Department of Education. And last year, the department issued a circular which contained guidelines to schools, especially public schools. In terms of these guidelines, schools were advised to keep their school uniform as generic as possible, so that parents would be in a position, to shop around and buy where school uniform is affordable. And where there is a need for exclusivity, such exclusivity should be limited to specific items. In other words, it doesn't make sense, for instance, for parents to be required to buy, say, a white shirt or a pair of black pants from a particular prescribed supplier, when that particular item can be bought from any supplier, including retail suppliers. The circular also indicated that when schools appoint service providers on an exclusive basis, there should at least be a tender process which would afford different suppliers an opportunity to compete for the supply of the school uniform to that particular school. And also, most importantly, once a school has decided to award a contract to a particular supplier after following the tender process, the duration of that contract should be short. In other words, a school should not have contracts of indefinite duration, because that would mean that there won't be any competition. And once the contract terminates, there should be another tender process which would allow other suppliers an opportunity to compete.
Give us an idea from your investigations now. Are you getting, or are you uncovering a culture of backhanders and corruption with regards to school governing bodies and educators and principals that are beholden by these companies?
I should point out that our investigation has not reached to that stage, but these are the things that we have heard from the public and from parents who have raised concerns. It appears that there are incentives that are given to members of school governing bodies, including principals, so as to induce them to appoint specific suppliers. Should our investigation uncover evidence of that nature, the Commission will collaborate with the relevant authorities so that those who are involved are brought to book.
What would be an ideal outcome for the Competition Commission out of this whole process?
The Competition Commission's primary role is really to encourage and promote competition in markets. So our ideal outcome would be the cancellation of any exclusive agreements that exist between schools and suppliers. In other words, we believe that the market should be opened up and there has to be competition, because once there's competition, consumers benefit. I should mention that as the Competition Commission, we don't see it as desirable, to be taking, suppliers and schools to court. Because schooling is a very important sector or rather education is a very important sector in South Africa. So we would really not be that keen to be taking schools to court. However, if there is no compliance with the law, that leaves us with no option but to prosecute where we find contraventions of the Competition Act.
Itumeleng, thank you for joining us live from Pretoria this morning from the Competition Commission's Enforcement and Exemptions Department. Itumeleng Lesofe telling us that, well, they've uncovered a lot of anti-competitive behavior within, call it school uniform monopolies here in South Africa to date. It's an ongoing investigation. They're still looking at the role of principals and school governing bodies and other kinds of educators within this. Of course, we're asking you the question and the poll. Go there at SABC Newsroom and get involved. We want to hear what you think, because this is at the heart of it. We're asking, the question is, why is a school uniform still necessary in modern day South Africa? Do we have to follow the old colonial ways? Do we? Do we really have to? At SABC Newsroom, that's where you can give us your contribution. And, of course, all of your contributions are important, because this is something that affects your pocket out there. Now, time for some housekeeping. Let's have a look at what's on social media right now. Of course, we can start with the big controversy here around the hashtag paid Twitter activist and entrepreneur. Shaka Sisulu has dismissed the accusation that he was at the center of an alleged 50 million rand off-the-books campaign on behalf of the ANC to gather paid support on Twitter. Then there's lots of sporting trends doing the rounds. Of course, AFCON 27, Egypt went up against Ghana, and both teams qualified, giving Mali the boot. Then a much-loved sprinter, of course, Usain Bolt. He's been stripped of one of his 9 gold medals, Olympic gold medals that is, for the relay, after it was found that his teammate Nesta Carter is guilty of doping. This was at 2008 Games. Then, further afield, Gambia's new president, Adama Barrow, is expected to arrive back in the country later today. It's a big story. We'll try and take that, take the live pictures as he comes back into the country. Then in Somalia, a Natal was attacked, leaving around 28 people dead, including journalists. The hashtag there, of course, Mogadishu attack, and there you see a picture and the aftermath. In the United States, President Donald Trump has come under fierce scrutiny after he announced that he is still adamant on building a wall along Mexico's border. However, the Mexican president says they will not pay for a wall. The two dignitaries are expected to meet next week. Interesting one, that one. Then, of course, on a sad note, renowned actress Mary Tyler Moore has passed away at the age of 80. There are thousands of messages of condolences pouring in for the great actress. Remember, we're asking you the question, why is a school uniform still necessary in modern-day South Africa? Why? It becomes so expensive, unaffordable. It's a relic of days gone by, if you ask me. Lawrence Bailey says, wearing your school uniform also teaches you about discipline and neatness. We don't want our school kids in flip-flops and shorts. No, you don't want that. But you can wear casual clothes that do exactly the same thing. And there should be a record on school as to how you should dress. Then King David Jr. says, Newsroom, in principle, uniform is a depiction of oneness, a symbol of being part of a unit in the external eye, necessary, not mandatory, says King David Jr. This one from Michael Detroit says, the uniform is a sign of one team under one umbrella board. Also accommodate all those people who don't have enough resources. I don't understand that, Michael. It's the most expensive thing to invest in is a school uniform. Lawrence Bailey says, school uniform is very important in our schools. It shows unity, and wearing your school colors is tradition. Whose tradition, Lawrence, is what we should ask. Whose tradition is this? It comes out of an old colonial era tradition. And we're talking about decolonizing education here in South Africa. Whose traditions are these that we are celebrating, we should ask, at SABC Newsroom? Come on, tweet us, tell us what you think. It really affects all of us. Now, for our picture of the day, this one comes from Omar Noor, and it's captioned, "The death toll rises to 20, including 5 attackers and 6 soldiers as Somali security forces end an Al-Shabaab siege in the Hotel Daya in Mogadishu." Sad story, that. Now, our comment of the day. Let's take a look at the comment of the day. It comes from the Periphery, who says, "There's no logical or ethical inconsistency in criticizing Cecil John Rhodes and his legacy while accepting a Rhodes Scholarship." Hashtag Joshua Not. Can you hear that, Josh? The whole country is talking about that. The whole world actually is talking about the kind of double standards that exist within exactly that. Let's have a quick roundup of the courts in South Africa. Now, in the east of Johannesburg, a man alleged to have raped a 13-year-old cancer patient is expected to appear in the Springs Magistrates Court. The arrest comes after the child admitted to nurses that he raped her on 4 occasions after it was discovered that she was both pregnant and HIV positive as a result. Then, still on the East Rand, forensic investigator Paul O'Sullivan, he's expected back in the Kempton Park Magistrates Court for alleged immigration offences. O'Sullivan was charged with contravening Section 26B of the South African Citizens Act because he left the country on 2 previous occasions using his Irish passport. Interesting one. Updates to follow. Don't miss it. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll turn the wick up on this discussion around cartels and monopolies running our school uniforms and whether it's still necessary. At SABC Newsroom, you can tell us. We'll take a short break.
It was bound to be an interesting debate with Donald and Hillary, him not even having bothered to prepare. So he was flying on instinct. And it didn't come across quite well. I'm starting a hashtag, medical fees must fall. There are many students who are protesting who are not necessarily violent. The students are saying the issue is how to implement, whereas the Commission's mandate is to look at feasibility.
Yeah. Among these countries, only South Africa allows same-sex marriages. Very concerning indeed, Prof.
Your sexual orientation does not demean your own humanity, doesn't make you less of a human being. That really is the essence.
Welcome back. You're still with the Newsroom show now. This is a contentious issue, so we've had a look ourselves, conducted some research to find out how many countries still make use of a school uniform. Now, the gold on this map shows that in most parts of the world, the majority of them still do so, and it is, of course, a real relic of colonialism, some form of uniform. Many of these represent military, navy and colonial attire. Yes, in many African countries, families can't afford the uniform. However, children will go to school in similar colored clothes. Some may avoid school if they can't afford the uniform. In Asian countries, a uniform is a symbol of pride, adopted mainly from the British. Even in the Middle East, some form of uniform with religious attire has been adopted. There are, of course, countries in Europe that have school uniforms. However, the regulations are very relaxed. Even in Britain, with only Catholic schools still very strict on the continent with regards to uniform. In green, you see the majority of schools in these countries do not have uniform. European and Nordic countries don't have uniforms at all. This is due to their harsh history, where uniforms, of course, were associated often with war and even the Nazi era we see in Germany. Something interesting, the UAE and Russia, they brought back their uniform rule just 3 years ago. Interesting take on it. We can confirm that some of the best, yes, some of the best schooling systems in the world don't have a uniform. So there's no direct correlation between discipline, work, and uniforms. It simply does not work. That's the tail of the tape, as it were, but let's go over to Elvis now to continue the discussion around, well, the cost firstly, but also is it still necessary?
Well, Eben, school wear is a major part of South African life. All public schools and nearly every private school in South Africa has some form of a uniform or school uniform, one way or the other. The Competition Commission, as you heard, says that it has received nearly a dozen complaints from parents forced by schools to buy uniforms from selected suppliers. Now, that's a practice that's prevalent in both government as well, mainly former Model C and even private schools. The Department of Education is responsible to set the guidelines on school uniform. The purpose of the guidelines is to ensure that practices related to school uniform do not impede access to education in any manner and do not infringe any constitutional rights of persons. From the Department of Basic Education, we have the Director of Education Management and Governance in Schools, Mr. James Ndlebe. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
First and foremostly, we heard, I don't know if you watched the insert a little bit earlier, in fact, the interview we had with the Competition Commission. They are investigating this case of collusion between some schools and suppliers, and some parents are complaining that school uniforms are becoming unaffordable. What's your take on that?
Yes, we have been working with the Competition Commission in this matter, and it's true that school uniform is becoming unaffordable, and it makes the whole system of education very expensive and unaffordable.
Mm-hmm. There are people that believe that a uniform helps to instill discipline and unity, but is that a proven factor?
I subscribe to that motion as a teacher myself. I've seen situations where on the days when you request children to put on civvies, then discipline goes out through the window. That day you'll have challenges in just maintaining discipline. I really believe in that. And I believe that when children are in school uniform, wherever you find them, whether in taxi ranks, on bus stops and all that, if they're in school uniform, they tend to behave much better when they're in a school uniform because they are easily identifiable and you can even identify the school that they come from. So it does help in instilling discipline.
I want to point your direction there to the map that we have there.
I would like to talk to you about this, sir, because, you know, it's easy to give our own feelings, but where's the science that says uniforms instill discipline? We have some of the worst disciplined schools in South Africa that wear uniforms. Even in prison we wear uniforms and there's no discipline. These are the countries in green where we also see children perform the best in schools. We have the best schooling systems, especially in these kinds of countries, best in the world. No uniforms. I did matric in Germany. No uniform. The children performed the best because they were handed the responsibility. And when you talk about neatness and the like, yes, you still have to dress in a neat way, in an affordable way, and so forth. But the idea that a uniform instills discipline is fundamentally flawed and definitely not backed up by science. Your response, sir?
My response is I'm not baking it on science, I'm baking it on experience. That
your personal experience?
Yes, my personal experience. One other thing that I want to bring on board in terms of uniform here is that probably the countries that you are quoting, the majority of them are countries that are rich in nature. And when you bring in the issue of uniform, you are trying to bring in, I would say uniform is an equalization type of a process. It bridges the gap between the rich and the poor.
No, it hides inequality. That's what it does. That's what you should say, sir. Uniforms hide inequality. That's at the heart of it. But surely we can't have a system where one man's experience, and you've never worked in any of these schools where there are no uniforms, am I right?
I wouldn't agree with
You've
you.
never worked in these, have you, sir?
No, I haven't worked with them, but I've worked
So-
in a lot of poverty-stricken schools. What I'm trying to say to you is that where there is uniform in schools, there is some sort of equalization there, because the children then are dressed the same way. Where you don't have uniform, that's where you find children that come from rich families having designer clothes and others don't have. It then puts pressure on those that don't have. And the problem with those that don't have is that they don't even have much of the clothes to change on a daily basis. So uniform allows them to be able to be at school and be looked the same way as the rest of the children in the classroom and continue to have something to come up with.
I have a different view of you, sir, than you, and I respect your opinion, but I'll maintain my different view because I've made the experience. I've made the experience in a different school without uniforms, and the freedom that you have, the responsibility that you have. Children grow up a lot faster and they take responsibility much more. But that was my experience, as you say. So I'll agree to disagree with you.
Now, if we look at the situation, having kids wear normal clothes in school, you've indicated that from your own experience, that you see that kids are not disciplined. But is there perhaps a compromise where you would have, because some schools do include Civics Day on a Friday, perhaps, where kids go, and you say that does not work?
No, if they do it occasionally, it does work. It does give children at least a day of freedom and so on. But I'm saying the pressure from the have-nots is too tremendous. And if that was to happen on a daily basis, children wouldn't have something to put up. I mean, we're talking about children that have 1 or 2 trousers for the rest of the year. Then where would they get these clothes to come to school and change on a daily basis? So that's where uniform closes this gap between the haves and the have-nots.
But if that is the case, there is still this issue of uniform becoming unaffordable. How do we bridge that gap, and what is the department doing to make sure that parents are not being charged exorbitant fees?
I think that's where the Competition Commission is coming in. What makes uniform to be unaffordable is that people tend to have contracts with particular suppliers, and they have these sole rights to provide uniform to particular schools. Now, in order to make it cheaper, open up the market, let the uniform be available everywhere. Whoever wants to supply a school, then a parent will have to decide where this uniform is obtainable. And that will make the price of uniform come cheaper.
Is a uniform not perhaps the answer, where you have a white shirt and a grey pants, and that's it?
Well, the argument here is that you might begin to have schools that will talk about their own tradition and their own trademark and want to maintain particular colors in order to be identifiable and all that. But they can have. But key here is who decides on school uniform? And if we can respond to that question, and our answer is it is the community, it is the parents there who are led by their governing bodies. So from the department point of view, we're saying schools need to consult broadly with the schooling community and the parents to decide on a uniform that is affordable and where this uniform can be found. And in that way, they'll be making the idea of uniform become cheaper.
Thank you so much for your time and joining us here in studio.
You're welcome.
That was Mr. James Ndlebe. He is from the Department of Basic Education, the Director of Education Management and Governance in Schools. Let's go over to Eben to find out what are you saying about this issue.
Tradition. Whose tradition? Colonial tradition? Some of our schools still celebrate our colonial past, and that is a fact. And we have to address that if we're going to decolonize our education system. Is a school uniform still necessary in a modern South Africa, is what we've been asking you. You guys are tweeting us. Let's get your views, because that's what Newsroom is about. It's about giving you a platform to tell us what you think. Mzukisi Silandela says, uniform is uniformity. It looks good and makes pupils look presentable. It's a sign of discipline. Uniform must not fall. I'm not so sure about that. I have made a different experience. Tawanda Wyson says, not all parents can afford to buy clothes for a kid for the whole term, let alone full year. Avoids embarrassing the kids being there. Mzikisi comes back. He says, employees in establishments and some governments wear uniform. It's identity and the same as in schools. Well, the best education systems in the world don't have uniforms. Tabani says school uniforms are important to maintain equality and a standard dress code. Once a week, students can be allowed to wear casual. Why do we have to have a standard dress code? It suppresses the individual for sure. Barry Martin says, people complain on high prices on school uniforms, but they buy children expensive clothing and they're not mourning, says Barry Martin. Those are some of your views at SABC Newsroom. Keep it coming. We love to hear what you think. It's a debate that South Africa needs to have around school uniforms. But let's take a quick look around the world. What's happening elsewhere? We'll start in New York. The Wall Street Journal reports that the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed at an all-time high as a rally in banks and manufacturers reflected investors' confidence that Donald Trump will preside over a new era of U.S. growth. Then, in China, the China Daily says President Xi Jinping's commitment to globalization and opening up at the World Economic Forum in Davos has bolstered European officials' confidence in expanding economic ties with the country. Finally, in Australia, the Daily Telegraph reports that the longest-serving politician is at the centre of a diplomatic storm with the USA, claiming he's been banned from the country for being a security threat. Some of the front pages from around the world. Let's go onto Facebook now and see what you can see there. Various stakeholders in the basic education sector have agreed to put the interest of the learners first, even in times of disagreements. This came out of the three-day basic education Lekgotla attended by officials from all provincial education departments, unions, school governing bodies and other interested parties in Centurion outside of Pretoria. Then President Jacob Zuma has congratulated the Unitas Hospital team after a successful operation in separating 3-year-old conjoined twin girls. Finally, the Cape Town Metro Police have appealed to the public to assist them with the investigation after a woman was shot and killed at the Sweet Home Farm informal settlement Nyanyanga yesterday. All of that on our Facebook page. Go there and like the page and you'll get all the latest news right in your feed. We're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk more about uniforms, whether they're necessary and whether they're becoming unaffordable. What's your view? We'll give you more after a short break.
The only way to pour the perfect beer, this professional barman would tell you, is into a glass tilted at exactly 45 degrees. Oh, bless you. Bless you, sir. Bless you again. Well, we'd say the perfect way to pour a beer is at this angle, straight into your mouth. Tops its bar. Good beer, good advice, no Ponzi beer stuff.
Welcome back with Newsroom. Now, private schools believe that a pupil's appearance has a significant impact on their attitudes and behaviours. Pride in what they wear inherits a sense of belonging amongst pupils, they say. This is reflected in their attire in the form of uniform and creates a respectable image for the school. Other private schools do not have uniform and learners attend school in their civilian clothes. Now, to talk about this, discipline and children adapting without school uniforms, we are joined in studio by Mr. Lebogang Monjane. He's Executive Director at the Independent Schools Association of South Africa. Very good morning to you, sir, and thank you for being with us.
Good morning.
Uniform instills discipline in pupils. Is that a proven fact?
No, actually, there's no causation between discipline and school uniforms. And you cannot reduce a school to its school uniform.
What do you then make of what is happening in South Africa right now with the cost of uniforms escalating, the Competition Commission investigating school governing bodies and, of course, suppliers for collusion, amongst other things?
The Independent Schools Association of Southern Africa has taken note of the advisory given out by the South African Competition Commission. And we do encourage schools to try and follow those guidelines. And of our 765 members, we did tell them they must comply with the guidelines they set out by the Competition Commission. And I think that those guidelines can assist schools to make sure that school uniforms do not get too expensive. We also would encourage many schools, they be public or independent, to consider having second-hand uses for uniforms because children grow. And also, we'd also encourage parents, do not buy uniforms. My mother used to buy uniforms that were 2 or 3 sizes too big for me because that's how we save money. And so I really would think that schools and parents need to be quite sensible on this question. I think the Competition Commission is correct. Schools must try and have multiple suppliers than a single suppliers, and they must get away from exclusive agreements.
Culture and tradition is often cited in this instance. Whose culture and whose tradition are these? And we often in South Africa now, when we talk about education, we hear the phrase, let's decolonize our education. How do you view this?
I don't know what decolonize education means. I think that there are many catchwords and phrases that have lost their meaning in South Africa because too many people are using them. And when you question them what that means, they cannot actually answer you. Schools and traditions evolve. And it is important that schools, and we in ISASA, encourage our schools to evolve their traditions for the realities of their new world. And schools and societies change. So tradition needs to change accordingly and really take cognizance of its history and the time in which we are and the time in which we hope to become as a country.
Now, you, as the Independent Schools Association of South Africa, you have actually pioneered at some schools the transition, if one can call it, away from uniforms. How has that process worked, and how are these schools functioning that have moved away from the uniform, as it were?
Within our membership, we have schools that are very traditional, have very traditional uniforms. Some still have bowler hats. Interestingly enough, of those schools that have actually discussed this issue with the student body and their parents, the most conservative responses often come from the pupils themselves, who say that actually they do not want to change their uniform and they're really quite proud of it. So it is interesting to us that actually when you put it to the students and to the parents, often they seek more tradition than not. But there are independent schools who are part of our members, and in ISASA we only have good quality schools who either have quality, values and diversity. And part of that diversity, some of our schools don't have school uniforms. And I know that you earlier mentioned the fact that you went to Germany and you didn't wear uniforms. Our German school in South Africa doesn't wear uniforms. Our Waldorf schools do not wear uniforms. And so, but for our new schools that are coming onto the market now, often they're using uniform that is quite generic and actually can be worn by both boys and girls, free, less constricted. And I think that ultimately diversity and decisions by communities at schools must be made by pupils and their families and parents.
So if you were an advisor to the basic education department, if I can ask you to wear that hat for a few minutes, what would you propose they do? Give the choice to parents and students and have both options available in South Africa?
I really love the South African Constitution and I'm a passionate advocate of it. And our South African Schools Act also comes out of our South African Constitution. And part of how the South African Schools Act is structured, it gives freedom and yet participation for each school to communicate and decide what it wants to be. And I think that that ultimately is what I believe that the South African Constitution and the South African Schools Act is appropriately structured so that schools themselves make decisions. School governing bodies, which have student representatives, parents, and teachers. So I think in many ways, we have wonderful instruments. So I encourage parents, especially those who are concerned about costs of uniforms, raise it within your school community to make sure that costs remain reasonable.
In conclusion, you've made the experience. If children are allowed to wear civilian clothes in South Africa, specifically to go to school, does that erode the identity and the unifying factors that we talk about, or have you made a different experience?
Just like you, I also have had an experience of going to school outside of South Africa, and my school didn't have a uniform, but it had a dress code.
Yeah.
Ironically, when you do not have a school uniform, the students choose to wear very similar clothes.
That is true.
And actually, so having a uniform or not uniform, actually, it really is neither here nor there. But there are advantages to having a uniform, because if you're a poorer family, you do not necessarily have to keep up with the fashion trends of children, which change with the fashion industry, sometimes on a quarterly basis or half-yearly.
Is that not dangerous in South Africa, that we could be hiding inequality and just sugarcoat what's really happening in our society?
School is about the mind, and it is about character. And ultimately, that is what we need to focus in on, not who has how many pierced earrings, where somebody has tattoos. And I think that really having a uniform and a code does assist sometimes the focus on education. But as I said earlier, discipline cannot come from a uniform or not a uniform. It comes from the institutional culture of a school.
Culture, culture, culture. Thank you for coming in today and clearing that up. That's Mr. Lebogang Monjane. He's the Executive Director at the Independent Schools Association here in South Africa. Discipline does not come from what you wear. Discipline comes from what's instilled in you. What you believe, what you become, your culture, ultimately. Thank you for joining us and giving us a, as you say, a contrarian view sometimes, a little bit like that. Here we have it. We're gonna take a short little break. At the top of the hour, we'll be back with our top stories, news headlines and the like, but we'll also continue and escalate the discussion around affordability of uniforms, collusion with monopolies, and also, is it still necessary? Don't go away.
Information-hungry viewers stay with SABC News, as issues on the West are different from issues on the East or here in Johannesburg. So it is not surprising that people who follow the news know that there are two things for sure: that anything can happen, and SABC News will tell you when it does. Because we keep the nation fully informed. We are SABC News.
Hypertension is the condition where the blood pressure, the pressure in the blood vessels, it goes up.
We often come out at the top of the ladder having the worst numbers. And I think that's because we almost have what I can call a perfect storm of high blood pressure risk factors.
If you are diagnosed with hypertension, you just have to continue taking the medication for the rest of the life.
Because we try and reintegrate them, and we try and retrain their abilities to be part of social society.
We do a lot of work trying to educate people, trying to encourage and motivate people to lead a healthy lifestyle. So what a healthy lifestyle means from a blood pressure point of view is obviously the more active you are, and the better your heart is, the more fit your heart is, and the better condition your blood vessels are.
Catch Health Talk every Saturday from 9 to 10 with Dr. Sillo Mutawu.
South Africa remains in the grip of a dry spell. It's led to water restrictions imposed across the country. About 20,000 cubic centimeters are being released per second. Authorities say that it could take 10 days. In the meantime, they're appealing to residents to use water sparingly. Transnet says that it's increased its revenue despite the weak economic conditions affecting volumes that it handled.
The company says going forward it will be investing in mergers and acquisition opportunities to expand Transnet services. It says while it does not believe South Africa will be downgraded, it has however begun negotiations with lenders to prepare for any eventualities.
A conscious move from being a street kid to being a barrister of note.
Keep on praying for me to make a better life.
A creative application of the mind on an essential need, water in wheelbarrow containers.
How about if we were to come up with an idea of an enclosed container that sits on top of the frame of a wheelbarrow?
With the sharing of resources, a boy with Russell Silver syndrome receives medication.
The fact that you just said to me, well, you're covered for next month, that's amazing.
So that's the medication.
For more inspiring stories, stay tuned to Bupilong every Friday.
Welcome back. Yes, we are the Newsroom show. It's gone 10 o'clock Central African time. We're live from Johannesburg. I'm with Kendall Machamati. Good morning, Kendall.
A very good morning to you.
Good news. Venus Williams playing Serena in the final. Isn't that great? That's great for the world, isn't it?
It is great for the world of tennis. A whole lot of people have been looking up to these two sisters as they trailblazed and held flags aloft for women and tennis as well. And they've done extremely well for the first time in the meet since 2009, mind you.
Yeah, brilliant.
In a Grand Slam
It's
final.
nearly 8 years now. Now, of course, today our focus on the show is on school uniforms, the significance of it, and whether or not it's become a relic of the past. We're conducting a poll on, well, parents that have to deal with the exorbitant cost of basic school requirements, such as the uniforms, the stationery, that run into thousands of rands. And we're asking you, are school uniforms becoming unaffordable for parents? Now, we've got 183 votes in thus far, Kendall, and people are overwhelming saying, yes, you're a parent. Is it becoming too expensive?
Well, I'm not at that stage yet where I have to consider school uniforms. My eldest child is still in creche.
Okay.
So having said that, I am keeping my eye on it, and it's something definitely to be aware of.
Yes, of course. We escalate the discussion as always here on Newsroom, and we ask, yes, there's collusion, there's the like, we've had those interviews, but we're also asking a question to you. And we know you guys are tweeting us feverishly with regards to our question of the day. So that question is on your screen right now. Why is a school uniform still necessary in modern day South Africa? At SABC Newsroom is where you've been tweeting us. Let's have a look, Kendall, at the tweets that people are sending into us with regards to school uniforms.
Let's hope that we've got Maschaba Zamisa says, I believe I came from a poor family, but through saving, my mum could afford my full uniform when I needed it.
Big ups to your mother. Badada says, Newsroom, if uniforms unify students, why is it we still have gangsterism in schools? Yes, Badada, this is the questions that we have to ask. There's a lot of unscientific ideas around what uniforms do in South Africa. A lot of it, I think, comes from the same monopolies that tell us to pay exorbitant money for uniforms. George says?
Mashinini says it's a monopoly that's being played out to make school make money. It's unfair and should be scrapped.
There's a straight-up view from George. Masechaba, she comes back, she says, if parents can no longer afford school uniforms, which are usually bought once a year, how will they maintain civvies? Well, you have to wear civvies, you have to wear clothes, ultimately, otherwise you can't walk the street.
Yeah, once again, we've got that gangsterism thing about if uniforms really do unify, why do we have gangsterism?
Okay,
and Olwetu reckons uniforms do not impact the child's performance. SGBs should come together and discuss hair issues. Now that hinders kids.
It always comes back to hair in South Africa. Lorenzo Bailey, good morning, Lorenzo Bailey says, let teachers also start wearing uniforms. Maybe then they will have a different view, says Lorenzo. That's an interesting view, Lorenzo. I like that. I like that a lot. Yes, if children have to wear uniforms, then so do the teachers. That one, according to Lorenzo. Interesting one. Well, that's the question of the day. That's our poll at SABC Newsroom. Interact with us. Tell us what you think. It's really nice to see what you guys think on this emotive topic in South Africa. But there's a lot of news. Let's get straight into our work with the headlines. Lawyers have concurred that searches without a warrant under the Financial Intelligence Centre Amendment Bill are not unconstitutional. ANC Secretary-General Gwede Mantashe says the biggest challenge facing South Africa is low economic growth and potential massive job losses as a consequence. Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto has condemned Donald Trump's order to build a wall along the U.S.-Mexican border. Those are your top news stories right now. Let's go over to Kendall to get your sports headlines.
Evan, thank you very much. It's been a very exciting morning so far.
Yeah,
We
great morning.
have had to change everything I had planned for this morning with everything that's come out in the news. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today.
She's my toughest opponent. No one's ever beaten me as much as Venus has, so, you know. She has a pretty good record against me, and we have a good record against each other, so it's...
For the first time since 2009, the Evergreen Williams sisters, Serena and Venus, will meet in a Grand Slam final when they take to the court in the Australian Open final this coming Sunday.
Mohamed Salah.
Egypt and Ghana advance to the African Cup of Nations quarterfinals as a brilliant Mohamed Salah free kick wrong-foots Ghana's keeper, giving Egypt a group-topping victory. And sprint legend Usain Bolt loses one of his 9 Olympic gold medals after Jamaican teammate Nesta Carter is found guilty of doping at the 2008 Olympic Games. All this and more for you we'll have in more detail at 10:40. For now, it is back to Evan, who's got the news.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kendall. Very good morning to you if you've just joined us now. Parliament's Standing Committee of Finance has heard varying differences of opinion on the Financial Intelligence Centre Amendment Bill. Legal opinion from Parliament and National Treasury dispute that the bill is unconstitutional. However, the Black Business Council and the Progressive Professionals Forum disagree. The bill is aimed at fighting money laundering, corruption and the funding of terrorism. It was approved by both houses of Parliament and sent to President Jacob Zuma to sign into law. The President sent it back with certain reservations, especially about the constitutionality of searches without a warrant. The Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution took the matter to the Constitutional Court, trying to force the President to sign the FICA bill or refer it back to Parliament if he had some reservations. The committee will now meet again next week for further deliberations. The biggest challenge facing the country is low economic growth and potential massive job losses as a consequence. This is according to ANC Secretary-General Gwede Mantashe. He was speaking at the ANC Lekgotla, which began in Pretoria yesterday. Mantashe says the Lekgotla comes at a time when the country recorded the slowest growth in the economy but avoided being downgraded to junk status. He says the ANC government must strive to grow the economy in order to overcome some of these challenges. This is the last ANC Lekgotla under the current leadership of President Jacob Zuma as the party braces itself to elect new leadership in December this year.
We are appealing to the committee to say, tell us concrete things that should be done. Policies are there, they've been refined, revisited, clear. But what can we do to grow the economy? That's why we'll say that when you give you the briefing at the end of the Lekgotla, which is going to be 2 days, we'll be talking a lot to mining, we'll be talking a lot to agriculture, we'll be talking a lot to manufacturing, we'll be talking a lot to the fourth economic revolution, which is innovation, being at the cutting edge of economic growth. That is on the economic side, that is the issue that we're going to be dealing with. We'll be talking to land reform and land redistribution, the importance of access to land.
The governing party also rejected claims that it set up a covert election campaign or war room aimed at allegedly undermining the EFF and the DA during last year's local government elections. Its Secretary-General, Gwede Mantashe, has called for the regulation of social media as the alleged anti-opposition campaign and fake posters went viral on the internet.
The governing party dragged to court for allegedly failing to pay a service provider. The business person has claimed in court papers that he was part of the covert ANC election campaign known as War Room. The operation was funded to discredit opposition DA and EFF ahead of the 2016 local government elections. ANC stalwart's grandson, Shaka Sisulu, implicated in the saga, has refuted the claims. In a statement, Sisulu says though he volunteered to assist the ANC campaigns, he did not take part in the covert operation to discredit opposition parties. He claims he's unable to run a secret operation involving 50 million rand. ANC Secretary General Gwede Mantache dismissed the matter as a business deal between the party's general manager and a service provider. However, he says a policy is needed to regulate the social media.
Business Communication Department to develop a social media policy that will regulate that space. Here, a general manager of the ANC is implicated. We're dealing with that matter.
Meanwhile, the IEC says should circumstances require it to take any action on the allegations of war room campaigns, it will not hesitate to discharge its duties and obligations. Montlengani Dipoko, SABC News, Johannesburg.
The ANC Youth League has called on party leaders to stop entertaining the succession debate before nominations are made. It calls this alien behaviour, despite some of its own provincial structures making their own pronouncements.
The ANC Youth League's main focus for now is the upcoming policy conference in June, and it strongly condemned leaders who are suggesting successors to President Jacob Zuma. This despite the ANC's National Working Committee's call to wait for the right time. The youth structure says it wants a leader who will collapse what it calls white monopoly capital.
The NEC of the ANC and the current NWC of the ANC has taken a decision that we must desist from talking about names and availing ourselves as we have seen other people doing. So everybody will be reprimanded, including our own provincial structure in KZN.
Earlier reports suggested that their announcement would shock the nation, but now it says it will make its wishes known after the June policy conference. Nhlanhla Gatlani, SABC News, Pretoria.
The EFF's quest to clinch its first municipality has been given a boost. The DA has tabled a motion of no confidence in the Matsemaholo Mayor Sello Tlasa. The EFF is finalising talks with the DA, which has the most seats in the council, after the ANC to get into a coalition. The DA-led coalition won the municipality during local government elections and elected Tlasa from the Matsemaholo Community Association to lead this Free State municipality.
This is the office the EFF has set its eyes on. But first, the party needs to get rid of Mayor Sello Tlasa. That quest has been given a boost by the DA's motion of no confidence in Tlasa.
We are also perplexed by the change of attitude of the DA just to pass this motion. They haven't even answered me about those 14 questions that the last due date was the 15th of December 2016. And now I see the continuation of this motion. But also, more importantly, we have a contract. They could have called the PLC, Political Management Committee, to say we have these issues that impact on the executive mayor, Sello Tlasa. How can we solve this matter?
Tlasa is accused of being in bed with the ANC. It's an allegation both the party and the mayor deny. However, the ripple effect is significant, and the numbers favour the DA-led coalition.
Since we started with the mayor, the MCA, we didn't get any joy. Whatever that he had promised the people that will deliver for Matsemaholo, he didn't do that as an organisation. Therefore, we had to support the DA.
What is evident is that talks to get an EFF mayor are not as easy, considering the differences in ideology and policy. From this telephonic interview with the DA's James Self, it seems the DA won't just give its votes to the EFF and walk away like the Red Berets did in Tshwane, Joburg and Nelson Mandela Bay.
We're still discussing the arrangements, and I have no doubt that in due course we will have further discussions. But nothing is yet being finalised.
Does the DA then have a candidate that it wants to put forward?
That matter is still under negotiation.
The council will vote on Tlasa's future on Tuesday, just a day before a by-election in the area, which itself could throw a spanner in the works. Aldrin St-Pierre, SABC News, Sasolburg, Free State.
Now we go back to our theme of the day. Of course, we're dealing with school uniforms. Now, the Competition Commission is poised to get tough on South Africa's school uniform monopolies, which force parents to cough up thousands of rands for new school kit, even though similar items can usually be bought elsewhere at a fraction of the cost. At the heart of the Commission's proposed investigation into the 10 billion rand school uniform industry are long-standing exclusive supplier arrangements entered into between school governing bodies, principals and retailers, as well as manufacturers. Now, school uniform manufacturer Gems Schoolwear has long been in the school uniform market. The company was established in 1968 and started selling the first school uniform in 1976. Currently, this business has 8 factories that produce uniforms made in South Africa by South Africans. Yusuf Vanka from Gems Schoolwear joins us from our Durban studio this morning. A very good morning to you, Yusuf. Thank you for being with us.
Morning to you too.
Yusuf, give us your view quickly. How do you view the investigation into monopolies that are, well, making school uniforms almost unaffordable for South African parents?
Okay, we had this debate plus minus in 2004 with then Mr. Qadri Asmal. Now, it's only certain aspects and certain provinces where we find this is rife. KwaZulu-Natal, we are lucky enough, we don't have that kind of issues where they've got monopolies and contracts with schools.
Now, what do you make of the allegations that backhanders are being paid and long-standing exclusive agreements are agreed upon? And how does it affect someone like in your business?
Okay, we keep on hearing about this. It does exist. I'll be lying to say that it does exist, especially with the private schools, and now you've got this new chain of private schools that come about. Lots of them have their own agreements. We as suppliers, we contact them and say, listen, sorry, close shop, we cannot use you. To give an example, what would sell in our shop for 100 rand sells there for 350, 400. That there needs to stop. There's too much of that happening. But lucky enough, we don't have any contract with any school that we deal with up to now.
What do you think should be happening going forward with the investigation of the Competition Commission? Do you think it's time to scrap all these agreements and have more competition in the school uniform sector, more openness?
Yes, but what government needs to do, they should set up a committee, maybe firstly approach manufacturers, look at different types of uniform, different costs of uniform, and different uniform fabrics. Thereafter, go to the schools, look at the size of the schools. I'll give you an example. You get a school, maybe there's about 40 children in that school. How can you have 3 or 4 suppliers for a school of 40 children? Then you got a school which got 2,000 kids. There, obviously, you'll need 2 or 3 suppliers. So people need to, the government needs to look at that, look at affordability, look at ways of reducing the price, speak to manufacturers, and I suppose take it from there.
The problem that we have, though, Yusuf, is parents are now complaining about high cost of school uniforms, and they're saying that it's becoming unaffordable, and in some instances they are forced to buy from only one supplier who's got this kind of agreement with a school.
Yes, that is agreed, but again, we need to identify who the schools are. Right, those schools, government or the Department of Education needs to go to the schools, find out what's happening, and look at price, and look at relativity, and look at quality as well.
The Competition Commission will make all of those names available in due course when they publish all the details of the investigation. Now, how do we make school uniforms more affordable in South Africa?
It's very simple. Okay, I can't talk for other manufacturers, I'll talk for our philosophy. We try and keep our prices low as possible, markups as low as possible. We buy, I don't say we buy cheap, we buy quality fabrics at a very good price, number one. Number two, we don't have a 10% increase every year. A price of a school shirt, if you bought from us 2002, was 30 Rand. 2017, that same shirt is 60 Rand. So it's basically 3.5% every year for the last 15 years. So that's a very, very small increase.
Going forward, what do you want to see happen in the entire industry? Do you think it's time for us to re-look at the whole industry and regulate it better?
Yes, as I said, yes and no. Yes, for certain players in the market, definitely they've got the upper hand and they've got this supplier contracts. We have to look at those schools, those service providers, and we need to take action against them.
Yusuf, thank you very much for joining us from GEM Schoolwear, joining us from Durban, talking about well, school uniforms, affordability, the cost of making them. They've been doing it since 1976. Now, that is, well, more than 40 years. Live from Durban. Let's have a look at, well, the poll that we're running. We're asking you, is it becoming unaffordable? Is it school uniforms? Are they becoming too expensive for parents? Is it that what we have? 183 votes. It hasn't been updated, unfortunately, but we still sit on above 80%. Above 80% say it's becoming unaffordable. There's the update. Thank you very much. 193 votes in now. Still, 81% say, yes, school uniforms are simply becoming unaffordable. There's a massive strain on parents around South Africa. We're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion around school uniforms, and we want you to tweet us at SABC Newsroom. Don't go away.
R1.4 billion was raised to build the institution. Additional funding came from ordinary South Africans.
It's been heartwarming to have seen the project from 2009 when the first sourcing happened to see it today being completed. Indeed, this is going to be our benchmark going forward. It's just been incredible.
Jammeh has said in the past that only Allah can remove him from office, and once claimed he would rule the tiny riverside West African nation for 1 billion years.
We are going to win this election.
Even if we avoid a downgrade, we're still hovering very dangerously close to junk, and that'll of course affect markets next year.
Our markets are actually already punishing us for a downgrade that may or may not come.
Woods made a blistering start but eventually slumped to a 1 over par 73 and is 9 shots behind the leader and his compatriot JB Holmes.
You know, I just made some really, if you look at it, some really silly mistakes. Mistakes I don't normally make, but I hadn't played in a while, and you know, unfortunately I made those mistakes. I can clean that up.
Welcome back. They say wearing school uniform and a badge brings a sense of pride, creates an identity for a school and a sense of belonging. Wearing a school uniform, this is according to a teacher, is halfway there to being respectful and buying into what the organization is all about. Is there any science to that? In America, the majority of schools do not have a uniform. Approximately 160,000 children miss school every day due to the fear of attack or intimidation by other students. This might not be directly linked to what they're wearing, but having a uniform can be a safety net for learners who might otherwise suffer from bullying, they say. A strict uniform gives the impression that rules are too strict, perhaps helping maintain a sense of order at school. But do uniforms instill a sense of discipline within the school, with school-going children? We are joined from Pretoria now by the President of the National Professional Teachers Organisation of South Africa, Mr. Basil Manuel. Very good morning to you, Basil. Thank you for being with us today.
Pleasure to be with you.
Basil, school uniforms instill discipline. That is the most unscientific thing I have ever heard. Would you agree with me?
In part. I don't think it instills discipline. It certainly aids discipline. And in many schools, you need these aids. There are many things that create discipline, but certainly it's not the only issue. And so on that score, I would agree with you.
What's the significance then of school uniforms in the South Africa of today? Is it still relevant? Is it not us yearning to a colonial past?
I think we need to contextualize a number of things. Number one, school uniforms aren't compulsory. It's the governing body decision to have a school uniform or not. In most cases, I think there's a tradition of wearing a school uniform, and very few governing bodies have applied their minds to whether it is a necessary evil or not. But certainly, having been a head of a school myself, I can tell you, and of a primary school at that, it certainly aided in certain things, particularly when we took 70, 80, 100 children out on an excursion. It gave a sense of identity. It was a sense of protection because this was an inner city school where hundreds of kids walked to school and they identified with one another. And the community assisted in ensuring that kids who were not towing the line were brought to book because they identified with the uniform. But the uniform is not the beginning and the end of everything. Schools will certainly cope without it. At the moment, yes, if you suddenly don't have a uniform, there would be a change in behavior. But then that would settle down too, because people are accustomed to certain things at the moment. That certainly doesn't mean that that is the only thing that works.
Basil, how long have you been a teacher?
31 years.
And is it today, do we have the worst, most ill-disciplined children today in your history in 31 years as a teacher? Is that accurate?
No, certainly not. I think our children are different because they're exposed to different things than to the child community of, let us say, 20 years ago. It's the media, it's so many things that have changed. And that is like it has always been. Every few years you will see children changing. It's happened since the day of Adam. So it's untrue that we have ill-disciplined children in their large masses. Communities have changed. Inner cities have changed. Communities have different sets of values. And because the school system doesn't adapt as quickly as the community around it, there is this perception that we have the worst of the worst today. But I want to debunk that myth. What I am saying is that there are more schools with problems because communities have evolved differently around those schools.
Basil, you give us hope. Thank you very much for that. It's so nice to hear from an educator. Normally when I speak to educators, they tell me children come with knives to the school. There's no fence around the school. The gangsters come onto the school. And all these are the things that I, as a journalist, am faced with every day. So it's wonderful to hear that it's not really as bad as they say it is. Let's move on then. I want to talk quickly about affordability with you because uniforms, no doubt, are becoming unaffordable simply because, well, monopolies are running a racket. Cartels are running a racket in the uniform business. Do you agree with the statement that it's becoming a little bit unaffordable?
I will say that uniforms have become far more expensive. But I think one of your previous guests indicated that it all depends on the design of the uniforms and the type of uniform a school wants. If you look at boys' uniforms as an example, they're more or less generic. All schools wear grey pants, basically white shirts. Others wear maybe blue or yellow shirts. So you'd find that boys' uniforms are far cheaper than girls' uniforms are. But then it's those add-ons that make the difference, the jackets and so on. So yes, it is a costly exercise, but the question is whether if you are comparing fairly, are you really saying that a set of uniforms is more expensive than a set of clothes bought to the same extent?
Yeah.
And I believe that, in fact, it wouldn't be necessarily all that expensive. But I would also say that most parents would say, thank heavens there's a uniform. I don't have to dream up what my child must wear. I don't have to have this battle of wills between that is appropriate and that is inappropriate to wear. And certainly, I can tell you that the teachers at school say, thank heavens there's a uniform for that very reason.
Surely.
Because it takes away having to fight about something not as significant as the schoolwork of the day.
Basil, shouldn't we be teaching our children at home to go to school to learn and not to be a fashion model if we had to ban the uniform? Surely that could help. It works pretty much everywhere else in the world where it's implemented.
I can't agree more. I actually agree with you, but let's look at the history in another facet of our community. Let us go to the universities, where most people dress very casually. But there you will always have that element, as you yourself would know, of people who think it's a fashion parade.
Yes.
So because we are individuals, we'll always find that happening. Those kids pressurize their parents. They in turn pressurize the other children. I'm not an advocate of uniforms, but I certainly appreciated it as a teacher, and certainly as a principal I did too.
Basil, very refreshing talking to you today. That's the president of the National Professional Teachers Organisation of South Africa, NAPTOSA, Mr. Basil Manuel, coming to us from the capital, Pretoria. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Now, of course, we're asking you the question, why? Why are school uniforms still necessary in modern-day South Africa? It's a fair question, we think, to ask. It's on screen. You guys have been tweeting us. You guys are very into this question by the look of it. Let's have a look at what you guys are tweeting us to. Well, what are the latest tweets with regards? Well, as we're getting our next guest ready here behind me, working studio, that's what it is. Let's just have a look at what Justin Townsend tells us. Justin says, so you want to highlight inequality in schools? Will you be buying my son a 2,000 rand pair of trainers because his friends wear some? Well, you should teach your child not to want to wear that because his friend wears it, Justin. Kololo says, Newsroom, taking away uniforms will expose financially weak parents. Uniforms create standard, don't compare third world to first world. Okay, interesting. Mogobo Tahani says, Newsroom, my children are more enthused to go to school in Civies days. Free the little ones from the uniform to promote their individuality. Thank you, Mogobo. Very enlightened view there. Tavanda Wyson says, Newsroom, Lebogang and James, spot on. Education should deal with the mind, not with clothes. Otherwise, dropouts will increase, says Tavanda. Then Anderlex comes, he says, Newsroom suppliers should be challenged with competition. These monopolistic, exclusive suppliers are a rip-off to poor parents. Yep. Keep it coming at SABC Newsroom. That's where we want you to send us your contributions on the show. Those are your views. Should we just drop the school uniform? Is it becoming unaffordable? Are monopolies putting a gun to our heads with the prices and forcing us to go to their preferred suppliers who then inflate prices? Well, these are fair questions. Now, according to financial planners, research indicates that the cost of raising a child here in South Africa averages around 90,000 rand per annum. Yes, that's for all of us, 90,000 rand per annum. That does not take into consideration inflation or growth. The costs could escalate to more than 2 million rand if the same child is taken care of by parents until the age of 23. Now, a word of caution to many parents is think before starting a family, and a financial plan is crucial if you're going to have children. Now, to talk about the cost of raising a child in the South Africa of today, well, we are joined in studio by Prine Setu, who is the head of financial advisory at First National Bank here in South Africa. Prine, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much.
You've just watched the whole debate around school uniforms. Of course, people are passionate about it. Some say, oh, it instills discipline and the like. But the one thing that affects us all is cost. And raising a child is one of the costliest things you can do. Why is it so costly to raise children in South Africa?
So there's a number of factors that contribute to it. A lot of these factors are outside of our control. So if we just think back to the South African economy, the rising cost of living, and that can be attributed to the low economic growth, rising inflation, high interest rates, higher unemployment rates. We currently sit with unemployment in South Africa at about 27% approximately. Over and above that, it's the cost of education that increases every year. So education inflation is currently estimated to be about 10%, which is above CPI in South Africa.
Is that the cost of raising a child? It's the role that education play in that cost is only 10%. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So look, the rising cost of education per annum is about 10%.
It's about okay. So what does it? education on its own, with all that stuff that goes with it, how much is it in that cake, if you can?
Look, I mean, approximately. So if you want to provide your child with a quality education, you're probably looking at about R1 million across the schooling lifetime. And to do that, you probably need to start contributing about 3,000 rands a month approximately towards a savings vehicle.
Yeah.
And that's highly unaffordable for the bulk of South Africans.
Yeah. What are the things that parents are not considering, the financial factors that one should consider when you're planning to have a child or when you have a child already?
Look, it's the lifestyle and financial changes that one needs to make. So we underestimate the cost of healthcare in the country, underestimate the cost of day-to-day living. And then there's various other factors. So what does education cost? Because that cost changes as children move through different phases in their life or their academic life stages. And again, so if we think back to the number of households where there's only a single income, how do we factor all of these costs into our daily living?
Yeah, in itself, it's a bit of a conundrum in South Africa because we're the worst savers, aren't we? We don't save money. The fact that we don't save money at all, what does that mean to us within the context of having children? Or do we just have children? We don't even plan to have a child in South Africa. Is that a problem?
It's a massive problem. So I think, if we look back to some of the research done over the last few years, current household saving as a percentage of GDP, it's almost negative. If we take that a little bit further and we say what is household debt as a percentage of GDP, it's closer to 80%. So those kind of stats all speak to South Africa's savings problem.
Yeah.
The fact that we live beyond our means, the fact that we rely on debt to maintain our current lifestyles.
That is a scary thing. The child that is at the effect of this, how does that affect the child in the long term? Do you have any research on that?
Not research available. However, all we need to do is just look around us, and we all know of people where, there's different standards of growing up for children and different access to different facilities. So, unfortunately, the top end of the South African population has access to more quality education, more quality facilities, and you see that coming through in terms of the sports stars that we develop and build, the artists, etc.
In a country like Iceland, they have the lowest number of delinquent children, and we talk about delinquent children. I speak about that specifically because it seems as if at times we have a problem with that in South Africa. They have lots of extramural activities for the children. Part of the savings problems mean that our children can't go to ballet, can't go to dance class, can't go to any a range of after school, let's call it activities.
Sure.
That in itself plays it out in our society then, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So if you think back to the number of children who have access to private academic institutions, the facilities that are available to them are far wider and broader than someone who probably attends a state institution. And that has a direct impact in terms of development and growth as well.
We see, of course, that education is very expensive in South Africa. We see our tertiary education, the problems we're having there. I think our high school is probably more expensive at the moment than tertiary.
Correct.
How are South Africans dealing with this? Or are we in total denial at the moment and we're just kind of living from hand to mouth a little bit?
Based on what we see from daily activities and engagements with customers is we are living in denial. We rely a lot on debt and credit to fund a lot of this. And that's the reason why, South Africans can't afford to retire, why we can't afford to live within our means, why we have such a high debt-to-income ratio in the country.
If you, as Standard Bank, if you had to give advice, and you're the head of advisory, if you had to give advice to parents and those that have just forked out money that they don't have in January for uniforms and stuff. If you had to give those parents advice now, what would those pearls of wisdom be?
It would be, look, avoid getting into debt traps. Keep your debt to income ratio as low as possible. Put a budget in place. And this is financial planning 101 or budgeting 101. It's effectively try and maintain a high level of disposable income. Save as much as you can. And I know it's easier said than done, but it's got to start somewhere, and it's got to start with you as an individual.
Pranay, thank you for coming in. I enjoyed that. Sometimes you need a bit of sobriety in order to deal with your issues. Yes, we can't let coffee take our problems away from Monday to Friday and alcohol from Saturday to Sunday. And then on Monday, we start all over again. That is not how it's supposed to work. We're supposed to have a financial plan. That's according to Pranay Satu, the head of financial advisory at First National Bank. We're talking about the cost of raising a child in South Africa. It's around 90,000 Rand every year. And if you're going to have your child live in your house until the age of 23, it's going to cost you well over 2 million South African Rand. That is for all of us. It's not one class or the other, everybody the same. Well, time for us now to leave this discussion. We'll pick it up once again in the next hour. But, of course, Venus and Serena Williams. Let me just get out a shot. Venus, thanks, Pranay, by the way. Thanks for coming in. Now, Venus and Serena Williams, they will meet in a Grand Slam final for the first time since 2009. It's 2017, by the way, guys. That is 8 years ago. Yeah. It's an incredible feat, especially by Venus, because she's almost pushing 40 a little bit.
Yeah, she was in 2011. You know what? She's almost pushing 40. She's halfway through there. But in 2011, she was diagnosed with having Sjogren's disease, autoimmune disease, which means literally joints are sore, wake up in the morning, can't move, you're tired all the time. And here she is competing at the pinnacle of world tennis. And she's actually competing in a final against her sister.
And her sister is probably the greatest player of all time. I heard her say a little bit earlier, Venus is the player that's beaten her the most in her life.
She did say that. You know, it's actually a 16-11 record that they've got between the two of them. But, yeah, she respects Venus's serve and her forehand.
Yeah, everyone does. Everyone does. It's probably one of the best in the history of tennis, that first serve of Venus. But now, when you get a little bit older, you get a little bit more emotional. I'm sure this will be probably the highlight of both of their lives, this final over the weekend.
You know, Eben, it's almost as if you were actually sitting with me watching both these matches as they played out during this morning. The wins that you could see in both their faces and their reactions, it means a lot to both of them individually that they're going to be making it into a final for different reasons. And then, of course, that they're going to be playing each other.
Well, 20 years ago, Richard Williams told the world, Kendall, that these girls are going to dominate the tennis world for the next 20 years. The establishment laughed at him and he was kicked out of quite a few venues after that.
Who's laughing now?
20 years later, can you imagine that?
No, phenomenal stuff. I can't wait for this. It's at 10:30 a.m. Central African time that they will be playing this coming Sunday. That Venus and Serena.
Saturday, is it?
It's on Saturday night in Australia. Saturday night, Australia, which makes it really early for us. Yeah, so that's exactly what happens. And it's going to be fascinating watching these two pitted up against each other, Serena and Venus Williams, in a final again.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Turning back the clock, Venus and Serena can only be good for the world of tennis. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, well, Kendall's going to tell us why we lost against Sri Lanka last night.
Came up with this really cool concept that we both absolutely loved, and it was tennis inspired, sports likes if you will, but still really edgy, and of course still staying true to who she is as a designer, which I felt was very important.
I am allowing them. If you do not keep your promise, you will never see my children again.
Fiona is a talented chess player. If it wasn't for her community that supported her, she would not have been where she is today. And so it takes a village.
I love working with children. They give you so much joy, and watching them achieve what we ask them to do is really heartening.
Children, Miss Hannigan is gone for good.
Mac Miller, the 24-year-old new school hip-hop international rapper, was shocked when he realized the big following he has in Mzansi. For a 1-hour dose of entertainment, stay tuned on Trends every Saturday at 12.
Good morning. My name is Kendall Makhamat, and I'm sure I have a lot to get through in this sports bulletin. Yes, we will be bringing you news about exactly what happened with the Proteas yesterday, but before we do that, let's talk about the AFCON, where Mali joined Uganda on the plane back home after playing out to a 1-1 draw in one of Group D's final matches at the Africa Cup of Nations football tournament in Gabon. In the other match, Egypt beat Ghana by a solitary goal to finish on top of the group as both nations marched through to the quarterfinals.
The Black Stars of Ghana came into their match against the Pharaohs of Egypt already guaranteed of a place in the next round. Egypt, on the other hand, had to at least get a draw to advance. But the Pharaohs wanted it more as they took the game to Ghana from the word go. They won a set piece just outside Ghana's penalty area, and their star midfielder Mohamed Salah did not disappoint.
Mohamed Salah avec une belle frappe. Oh, quel but!
Ghana suffered a major blow before half-time when their captain and leading marksman, Asamoah Gyan, picked up an injury and had to be replaced.
Ghana's captain will depart.
The Black Stars pushed for an equalizer in the second half, but the veteran goalkeeper Essam El Hadari stood tall between the sticks. The 44-year-old produced one fine save after the other to deny Ghana, and the match finished 1-0 to Egypt. In the quarterfinals on Sunday, Ghana will play against the Democratic Republic of Congo at 6 p.m, while Egypt will be up against Morocco at 9 p.m.
Still with an enormous enthusiasm for the game, even at the age of 44.
In the other Group D match played last night, Mali had an outside chance of qualifying for the quarterfinals when they took on the already eliminated Uganda on a wet surface. Nothing could separate the two sides in the first half, and they went into the break goalless. And midway through the second half, the Cranes of Uganda opened their account. Uganda's lead, however, did not last long as Mali won a free kick and Yves Bissouma unleashed a rocket to the top corner of Uganda's goal to make it 1-1. Both sides were eliminated from the tournament as they finished third and fourth respectively in Group D. Mduduzi Ndlovu, SABC News.
Now, Sri Lankan opening batsman Niroshan Dikwela picked up man of the match after the tourists secured a 5-wicket series clinching win against the Proteas. Victory in the third and final T20 international was historic for Sri Lanka. It was the first series win for the nation in any format on South African soil. After South Africa won the toss and chose to bat, they set the visitors a target of 170. Here's how it unfolded.
Pressure. That's trouble. This is trouble, and it is. It's gone. That's trouble. Straight down, square legs, throat, and he has.
And De Villiers has just sent it straight to a man at backward point. And picked that one up in the air. And there's no chance.
2007 was the leading wicket taker. That's in the air. It's a slower ball. He's got it.
Gone through him, wicket. He's done this so many times for South Africa, and he's gone.
And it does it again.
Oh, yes. A charges down, this time well bowled by Pedersen. It's on for run out, yes! And one more, two in.
Run out.
And they do it in style. Fist pumped. And the Sri Lankans, they have invaded the two batters in the middle. Sri Lanka winning the series in the end.
Well, you do know, of course, there were 5 or 6 drop catches in there. One of them, 3 of them, a hat-trick of dropped catches on Parnell's bowling. They surely should have won that match, but the Proteas will live to rue with all those dropped catches. Now, moving on to other news that's making headlines. Tennis's legendary Williams sisters, Serena and Venus, will do battle in the Australian Open women's singles final in Melbourne on Saturday. Second seed Serena thrashed comeback queen Mirjana Lucic-Baroni of Croatia in straight sets in the semi-final, while 13th seed Venus beat fellow American Coco van der Weijden. The Williams sisters last did battle in a Grand Slam final at Wimbledon in 2009.
Serena was always the favourite against the resurgent Lucic-Baroni.
She quickly won the first set 6-2 against the 34-year-old Croatian. It was clear that Lucic Baroni wasn't a shadow of the player who reached the last four, as she struggled with her serves and her nerves. The six-time champion was devastating, her power and control unchallenged. She won the second set 6-1 and wrapped up the match in 50 minutes.
At the top of her game, she demolished Lucic Baroni.
Lucic Baroni found time for a selfie, while Williams relished the opportunity to face her sister in the final again.
Well, she's my toughest opponent. No one's ever beaten me as much as Venus has, so, you know. She has a pretty good record against me, and we have a good record against each other. So it's, you know, I just feel like no matter what happens, we've won.
Earlier, Venus advanced to her first Grand Slam final in 8 years when she beat 25-year-old Van der Wey. The 36-year-old lost the first set in the tiebreak, but Van der Wey started to buckle under the pressure, and Venus bagged the next two 6-2, 6-3. Her reward, a place in the final after a 225-minute-long fight.
It'll be the 15th major singles final for her, and she is delighted.
You know, when you're playing against a player and you know, it's easier work, then you feel like, oh my gosh. But here she played so well, and there was never a moment of relaxation ever. So to be able to get to the final through a match like this, I'm excited about American tennis as well.
The Williams sisters are bound to rewrite the history books this weekend. Venus last reached the singles final in Melbourne 14 years ago and is the oldest player in the Open era to reach the singles final at the event. Serena is on course to win her 23rd Grand Slam singles title, a new Open era record. Liesl Zankel, SABC News.
I will, of course, be chatting to Liesl uncle about that very final, as well as what's happening in the men's draw. All this at 11:35. But before that, former world #1 Tiger Woods hopes that the familiar surroundings of Torrey Pines will ease his transition to tournament golf when he plays in his first full tournament. All eyes will be on Woods in the Farmers Insurance Open after he was sidelined by a back injury for almost 2 years.
Woods is launching his official comeback at the event, which he has won 7 times. The 41-year-old Woods has not played an official money event since August 2015 and pulled out of a planned return at the first tournament of the 2016-2017 season in Northern California in October. Last year, he said his game was not ready, but subsequently made his comeback at the Hero World Challenge, an unofficial PGA Tour event in the Bahamas in December, where he finished 15th in an 18-man field.
I miss trying to beat these guys. I really do. You know, these guys are. We're a fraternity out here. We see each other all year, and some of us have seen each other for decades out here, and it's just fun to be competitive and fun to go out there and compete at the highest level and against the best.
Woods will compete against other top golfers in the game, like Justin Johnson and Jason Day, the Australian world #1, who many experts say is the man to beat.
Not only has he gotten stronger, but just look at the way he's managing himself around the golf course and not making the silly mistakes that because all it takes is one mistake and it costs you a tournament, one shot, and he's not giving up those shots, and so hence he's in more events with a chance to win come Sunday, and he's capitalizing on them.
After years of using Nike equipment, this will be the first time Woods will play as a member of the TaylorMade stable. Sfeso Ramara, SABC News.
And now all of Tiger Woods' fans are hoping that this is the final comeback when he actually does step into those shoes that he left when he actually got injured the very first time. And I hope that he does well at this tournament. That's all we've got for you in terms of the sports. I'll be back shortly with Elvis to open up the show and more sports in the next hour. For now, Azwi has got the weather report.
Thanks very much and warm welcome. Yes, let's take a look at your weather report. Over Africa, we are expecting lots of showers, but mostly over the southern hemisphere. 30 to 60% chance of thunder showers and 60 just sitting over the central interior. Moving towards South Africa, we're seeing 80% chance of thunder showers over the northern parts, over the province of Limpopo and Mpumalanga. That is associated with heavy rain that may lead to localized flooding. So if you are in Limpopo and Mpumalanga, just be on the lookout for today. Do not cross any streams or do not drive on any running water. Otherwise, partly cloudy skies over most parts of Sahara and most parts of southern Africa. Partly cloudy skies over Western Cape, but no much rain can be expected for today. Tomorrow, we are expecting 30 to 60% chance of thunder showers. This comes with a cold front over Western Cape that will be sitting over the interior, bringing 80 to 60% chance of thunder showers over Western Cape, going to 60 as you move towards the Eastern Cape and over the interior of South Africa. Limpopo, just partly cloudy skies and some parts of Zimbabwe and the southern parts of Mozambique. Over the interior, still expecting 60 to 30% chance of thunder showers, but moving towards the far northern parts, we're only expecting partly cloudy to clear skies. A maximum of 30 forecast over Bloemfontein for today and 27 over Pretoria. 30 to 60% chance of thunder showers as you go to the northern parts for today, but over the interior, do expect partly cloudy skies and getting clear as you move towards the Western Cape Sutherland at a maximum of 29 degrees. Zimbabwe covered by 30 to 60% chance of thunder showers for today, and over Botswana, where we are expecting a maximum of 33 over Sirowe and 27 over Harare. Mahajanga sitting at a maximum of 33 degrees. Windhoek at 29 and 30% chance of thunder showers forecast for today. Now let's go to the central interior, where we're still expecting isolated to scattered thunder showers over the eastern parts. Libreville at a maximum of 29 degrees. 38 will be your maximum over Juba. Extremely hot over these regions, but Addis Ababa sitting at a maximum of 23 and 26 over Lilongwe. Not forgetting 30 to 80% chance of thunder showers. Now over the Sahara Desert, clear skies and dry conditions due to this high pressure system sitting over the interior. But along the coastal regions, we are expecting 30% chance of thunder showers, and over the far southern parts of Nigeria, along the coastal regions, do expect partly cloudy skies. Tomorrow, similar conditions expected as that high pressure system continues to sit over the northern parts, and along the coastal regions, we still expect isolated showers over those regions. Cold temperatures expected. Baghdad at a maximum of 4 degrees and 15 over Damascus. If you will be in Cairo, a maximum of 19, just partly cloudy skies. Over Benghazi, drizzle is expected for tomorrow with a maximum of 15, but hot temperatures over El Fasher at 41 degrees and 38 over Khartoum. Agadez just sitting at a maximum of 31 with partly cloudy skies. Let's go to Nigeria, where we are expecting partly cloudy. A maximum of 33 degrees is expected for today, and N'Djamena sitting at 39 degrees. Sunny skies over Conakry and over Dakar, Senegal. Las Palmas at a maximum of 19, 30% chance of showers forecast. That's all from the weather desk. Ndayando.
Probably you should ask the question, is the ICC targeting African leaders?
For the life of me, I would hate to be charged with crimes against humanity. Very few people can deny nor ignore that there are crimes being committed on the African continent at this very moment. Now, we need to be able to hold people to account regardless of where they are from.
South Africa has a body of international law that it's committed itself to, that seeks to counter impunity in the world when it comes to gross human rights violations. In this specific instance, we have a problem. By the way, you must remember that South Africa has a law on extradition and mutual legal assistance that enable us to extradite any fugitive of justice from anywhere in the world so that they can stand trial for whatever crimes.
The world has become digital, and we need to find new ways to solve current problems.
You're capturing your geo coordinates. So if you stay in a shack, you still have an address because we know where you are.
Some are using it to tell new African narratives.
our first priority is catering to our fans. We have to go where they are, and they're online.
That's Network with Ms. Phumelele Zondi every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time.
Information-hungry viewers stay with SABC News, as issues on the West are different from issues on the East or here in Johannesburg. So it is not surprising that people who follow the news know that there are two things for sure: that anything can happen, and SABC News will tell you when it does. Because we keep the nation fully informed. We are SABC News.
It's 1100 hours Central Africa time on this Thursday, the 26th of January 2017. This is the final hour, Jumbo Africa. I'm Elvis Preslin.
I'm Kendall Makamate.
Now we will be with you until 12. Now today we focus on school uniforms, its significance, and whether or not it has perhaps become a relic of the past. So we're conducting a poll, Kendall.
100%. And I would really like to find out from parents that have to deal with those exorbitant costs of basic school requirements. What the question is, are school uniforms becoming unaffordable for parents? And we've got quite a lot of responses. Of the 202 votes we've got, Elvis, it seems like there's an overwhelming yes.
Overwhelming yes, 80%. The people are feeling the pinch out there with the school uniforms, Kendall. So you can keep on doing that. You can still participate in the poll. You got 21 hours left to go, so do that. We're also running a question. We're asking the question to you today. Why is it still necessary in modern-day South Africa, this uniform that our school children are wearing? That's the question we pose to you. Let me take a look on what you have to say about this on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. This one from Tolani says, most parents will never be able to buy clothes for their children.
We've got Extrovert who says at SABC Newsroom, wearing uniform can decrease the risk of violence and theft, instill discipline, and help school officials recognize intruders.
Well thought there. Elisa says school uniform is necessary and should be made affordable. That's the bottom line.
Noma China reckons that the competition must act now. School uniforms are overpriced. No fee schools, but still pay a lot for it. Sad face.
Icona says school uniform should go away. A school teacher for more than 30 years, I can say school uniform is not necessary. Well, that's another point of view there from a school teacher of 30 years. Huh? Well, these are some of your comments. You can keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue during the course of the program. But right now, let's take a look at your news headlines. Lawyers have concurred that searches without a warrant under the Financial Intelligence Center Amendment Bill are not constitutional. ANC Secretary General Gwede Mantashe says the biggest challenge facing South Africa is low economic growth and potential massive job losses as a consequence. And the Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto has condemned the U.S. President Donald Trump's order to build a wall along the U.S.-Mexican border. That's your headlines. Before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall what's happening on the sports front.
Elvis, a great morning, a cracking morning of sports we've had already. Looking at the Australian Open, the Williams sisters have turned it into their show, and by come Monday morning, we'll be able to tell you which of the Williams sisters is the 2017 Australian Open champion. You know what? I get ahead of myself. This is what we've got for you in the sports today.
She's my toughest opponent. No one's ever beaten me as much as Venus has, so, you know. She has a pretty good record against me, and we have a good record against each other. So
for the first time since 2009, the evergreen Williams sisters, Serena and Venus, will meet in a Grand Slam final when they take to the court in the Australian Open final this coming Sunday.
Mohamed Salah.
Egypt and Ghana advanced to the African Cup of Nations quarter-finals as a brilliant Mohamed Salah free kick wrongfoots Ghana's keeper, giving Egypt a group-topping victory. And sprint legend Usain Bolt loses one of his 9 Olympic gold medals after Jamaican teammate Nesta Carter is found guilty of doping at the 2008 Olympic Games. All this and more I've got for you later on the Sports Bulletin. I'll also be chatting to Liesel's uncle about the Australian Open. Be sure to stick around. 11:35. For now, it is back to Elvis, who's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour. The Higher Education Minister, Bladen Zamunda, is addressing the media on the outcomes of the engagements held with the higher education stakeholders between the 17th and 24th of January 2017 on the state of readiness for the 2017 academic year. Zamunda said they have addressed historic debt issues with 4 NSFAS students.
We have identified the issues they raised, and we are working tirelessly to ensure that the issues under our control are speedily being attended to. Where there is a lack of adequate budget to deal with infrastructure funding and expansion of the student enrollment, government as a whole is trying to find relief in these trying times economically. The lack of disruptions in the TVET system last year was not only most welcome, it was an indication of the seriousness with which all the key stakeholders in our colleges, including students, approach their core business of empowering the next generation of young people with practical skills. This bodes well for the South African economy as well as the future of our young democracy. The mandate of the Department of Higher Education and Training is to develop a skilled and capable workforce that can contribute to a sustainable and inclusive growth path for our country. And the TVETs are crucial to this task. And also we must just explain at this point that TVET colleges are not aimed at absorbing students who cannot be taken at universities. That's a wrong way of actually understanding TVET colleges. We want to make TVET colleges institutions of choice because they offer skills that cannot be acquired anywhere else other than through these colleges. So some people tend to say, well, all those who have not been admitted to university, then to TVET colleges. There are many, many youngsters who do not want to go to university, who would like to actually go and acquire a particular practical skill at a college. Our task as government is to work to upgrade these colleges such that they are able to respond appropriately in this regard. Unfortunately, we as South Africans have in recent times often focused disproportionately on our universities instead of giving appropriate attention to the entire post-school education and training sector, and TVET colleges in particular, as I have outlined. Indeed, our 50 public TVET colleges are vital national assets which empower the next generations with very practical skills and knowledge. They make a vital contribution to the ability of our economy to be competitive. This is despite the fact that they currently face a number of real challenges. By the way, many more than the challenges we are facing at universities, including funding, challenges we are taking very seriously as we move to ensure a unified national approach to our TVET colleges. This is because it is only in the last 2 years that the TVETs have been managed and directed on a consistent national platform. You may recall that it is only fairly recently that the department has taken responsibility at national level for the TVET and further education sector because it was previously part of the provincial education competence. Though we started right from 2009 when our department was formed to begin to make some interventions there. Bringing the sector into a centrally managed and guided framework was a very important step towards ensuring that we create and sustain real and viable alternatives to a university course for those young people who want to gain a post-school skill, but who may either have not achieved a university pass or who may not have the inclination, as I have said, to pursue a course of academic study. What we inherited was a mix of colleges, with some provinces having managed their college sector better than others, in ensuring that the sector could at one and the same time be expanded to accommodate the many thousands of previously excluded young people, while ensuring that new entrants receive the kind of training and support which could ready them with skills the job market is looking for. Frankly, some of the provinces had not done well at all. And here and there we were confronted with a real mess. In some places, we are still in the process of ensuring that the right procedures are used when processing students, and we are aware that some institutions need further help to get on track, for example, in ensuring that students who qualify also receive their certificates quickly, because those certificates are the passport to the future for those young people who have put great effort into getting themselves qualified. Ladies and gentlemen, we recently received a list of grievances from the body representing TVET students, SAFETA. We take this list and the students' bodies very seriously. Over and above the current initiatives being implemented to improve the quality of teaching and learning at TVET colleges, I have requested the Director General to set up an intervention task team to speed up the process in those colleges, which are still lagging, and important announcements in this regard will be made in the next few weeks. We are determined not to let the situation go on for longer than is absolutely necessary. In addition, I have instructed the department to immediately convene an ongoing TVET forum, which will bring student representatives, college administrations, and senior officials from our department to the table. The aim is to ensure open, frank, and effective channels of communication and an ability to resolve challenges quickly, effectively, and sustainably. There is nothing in the memorandum we have received from SAFETA that cannot be resolved with a bit of goodwill and determination by the TVET colleges, of course supported by our department. Moreover, for that reason, I'm today inviting the students to be a part of this effort to get things right. The government's commitment to the higher education cause is demonstrated in part by the substantial increases in funding to NSFAS since 2010. We remain committed to finding the resources to support the children of all poor working class and middle class families in their quest to better their lives and those of their families through skills acquisition. For example, and as already alluded to above, I announced last year that all students who come from households with a combined income of less than 600,000 rands per annum will experience a no-fee increase for 2017, which would cover about 75% of university students, and some universities, more than 90% of the students will be covered, as well as in many colleges. This is one example of the issues raised by SAFETA, and the answer is very clear. Yes, the moratorium on fee rises up to 8% for 2017, and also 0% increase for the categories that we have outlined will also apply to TVET colleges. It's definitely not just for universities. This will bring huge relief to factory workers, miners, nurses, teachers, police, social workers, and other working families in occupations that do not earn huge salaries and who have children at colleges and universities. Ladies and gentlemen, we have made significant progress, and we continue to make significant strides in expanding access to higher education for the poor through NSFAS. This system, for all its challenges, has funded more than 1.7 million students since 1994. Last year alone, NSFAS supported about 480,000 poor undergraduate students to access TVET colleges and universities, dispersing loans and bursaries totaling 14 billion rands. This figure will rise to 15.2 billion rands this year. As the medium-term budget policy statement made clear, the government will provide an additional 9 billion rands for NSFAS over the 3-year period ahead. In addition, most importantly, NSFAS will be funding more than 200,000 first-time and continuing students at TVET colleges in 2017. That, by anybody's standards, is a massive amount of money and shows the high priority that this government is giving to further and higher education. It makes very clear the extent to which we are emphasizing TVET education as a path to the future for young people. Again, we have also made arrangements to pay the registration fees for all NSFAS-funded students upfront to TVET colleges and universities every year from now onwards. This means that NSFAS qualifying students will have a much easier time registering and starting their courses each year. Government has also addressed the issue of historic debt of NSFAS qualifying students who were registered in 2016 and who were successful in their studies, but who have accumulated debt with their institutions of higher education. They will all be allowed to register in 2017. You may also be interested to know that as a result of our efforts, a recent Stats SA report showed that South Africa is empowering ever more young people through post-school education and training.
Education Minister Bladen Zimbande there. That's currently on the way, giving us feedback in course of the preparations for 2017 and funding for students in 2017. Moving along now, Parliament's Standing Committee of Finance has heard varying differences of opinion on the Financial Intelligence Centre Amendment Bill. We'll come back to that story in a short while. Let's now go live to the Minister, where that is still continuing.
And to engage, which includes the Security Ministers, the Minister of Finance, and so on, and the Minister of Science and Technology, amongst some of the ministers who are actually part of that. Bongan, I'm not blaming. I know we are preparing now your story. Zimbande blames government. I'm saying as government we must take collective responsibility as this government to say, and in particular the African National Congress, as the ruling party, to say we need collectively to actually expand. It's already there in our policies, but that needs to translate into something concrete. I'm not lamenting or blaming the rest of government, except one thing I'm willing to say, that part of the reasons why we are here is because our own government in the 1990s followed a problematic economic policy called GEAR. If you ask me, sitting as a minister, this is part of the price we are paying. Because one of the things that GEAR did was not to fund higher education adequately. We are paying the price now. Some of us were raising this at that time and say, okay, we are saving money, but what would be the social debt into this? I'm willing to be open and actually take that one of the dangers of having experimented with neoliberal policies was that one of the biggest sufferers in all that economic policy, which some in the media, by the way, were supporting, is underfunding of higher education. We grew the system, which is very good in numbers, but we didn't match it with infrastructure funding of the main system itself. But now I'm part of government. We must take collective responsibility for the situation in which we are in. By the way, in government, it's generally agreed. The issue is when and how do we release the resources to be able to address this? Because our white paper has been adopted by government, and our white paper emphasizing this issue of TVET colleges. Normally, it's not usual for one part of government to differ with another part. But I disagree very strongly with the Statistician General when he says students in the 1980s were much better than students now. I was a student in the early 1980s at university. I was doing my postgraduate studies. There is absolutely no comparison from where we were at that time and now. I was a student from 1976. I lost that year. I'm talking from experience, not from theory or studying numbers. I'm talking from personal experience. I was nearly expelled at university in September 1977 because I couldn't pay 100 rands, my last installment. And there was no NSFAS. Coincidentally, I was given a loan by the Dean of Students then, who happened to be Professor Peng, who was our first Minister of Education.
Oh. Well, that was the Minister of Higher Education, Bladen Zimande, speaking about the preparedness for the 2017 school year. So, and of course, NSFAS, very topical subject there. But let's move on now. As you know, our focus is on school uniform today. Exclusive school uniform agreements have a negative impact on the pockets of cash-strapped parents. The agreements between schools and uniform suppliers could contravene the Competition Act. Tim Gordon, the CEO of the governing body foundation, says that the Commission should take action in the event of inappropriate practices by uniform suppliers. Gordon says that he would like to see that general uniform items like longs, shirts and skirts be available anywhere and just restrict distinguishing uniform items like sport kits and ties and pocket badges to be sold at schools. Tim Gordon, the CEO of the governing body foundation, is at our Sea Point studios in Cape Town to tell us more about this. A very good morning to you, Mr. Gordon. Welcome. Mr. Gordon, can you hear me? Well, it seems like Mr. Gordon can hear me, but I can't hear him. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to see if we can fix up Mr. Gordon's mic there. So if they can just sort it out for us in Cape Town studios. Let's take a quick break.
The Free State government has set its sights on exploring the flower industry as a means to grow the economy and boost tourism.
We must put a budget for the flower and grow the economy of the Free State.
It's very good advertising for Paris.
What a wonderful, wonderful place to be in right now.
The KwaZulu-Natal Fashion Council has launched a project to grow the fashion industry. It will showcase young designers' clothing ranges and ensure that it ends up in retail stores.
I remember starting making clothes when I was still quite a child for my dolls. I think my dolls were the best dressed dolls in my neighborhood.
These young designers are proof there's enough talent for local brands to compete on the international stage. The program will ultimately benefit the economy.
Now, we told you earlier about exclusive school uniform agreements that have negative impact on the pockets of cash-strapped parents. Those agreements between the schools and the uniform suppliers could contravene the Competition Act. We had them earlier this morning, Competition Act telling us about their investigation, and we'll keep you updated with that done. Now, joining us from our Cape Town studios is Tim Gordon, the CEO of the governing body foundation, and he says the Commission should take action in the event of inappropriate practices by uniform suppliers. A very good morning, Mr. Gordon. Let's see if we can connect now.
Good morning to you and good morning to your viewers. Good to be with you.
First and foremostly, should children be allowed to wear their civilian clothes to school, you think?
We feel very strongly in our organization that we mustn't allow the cost factors to interfere with the realities of uniform. You know, we must go back to where uniforms came from. The absolute origins of uniforms were to prevent discrimination. And if we lose sight of that very basic fact, we could be throwing out all sorts of babies with the bathwater. So no, we believe not only on cost grounds, but very particularly on social discriminatory grounds, political grounds, and various other grounds, that it's not a good idea to get rid of uniforms and just allow a free-for-all. You know, we see it so often on the occasions that in schools that free-for-all is allowed on the so-called civvy days and so on, and in some schools that don't have uniforms, that the whole issue of getting dressed for school becomes a real competition. It becomes a very expensive thing for parents to help their young people keep up with the so-called Joneses, and it develops into a real competition between the young people to see who can display the best wares the best. So no, we believe that it is very important that there should be school uniforms. There's also research which does tell us that the wearing of uniform immediately has an important bearing on the behavior and attitudes and approaches of young people. It's obviously quite difficult to prove that, and people will argue otherwise, but there's very credible research which says both of those things. Greater freedom of choice does lead to greater expense, greater competition, and less effective behaviors and controls in schools. So no, we would hate to see these things land up in the ditching of uniforms. By all means, go for those people who are doing anything illegal, those people who are keeping youngsters out of school on nothing other than cost grounds, but don't throw away the very good aspects of uniform together with those ones. Rather go for the individuals that are doing something wrong than try and change the whole system, which will be to the detriment of the whole system.
But Mr. Gordon, we are seeing collusion practices by schools as well as suppliers in terms of supplying these uniforms and driving up the cost for the parents. What do you say to that?
I say to that, go for those people who are doing it, because as many examples as have been taken to the Competition Commission, I believe I could bring you 100 to 1 where that's not happening. In the vast majority of schools, as you said in your introduction, we believe that the requirement on young people is to buy the very distinguishing colors, badges, whatever it may be, from a supplier, but that the parents are free to go to whichever outlet they are using or would prefer to use to get the items of standard dress, such as almost every school has either a white or a blue or a grey, perhaps a green blouse. Similarly, grey longs for boys, grey skirts or green skirts or maroon skirts for girls. And those are available everywhere. By all means, let the parents go and buy those where they can do it to best advantage. But I still believe that that doesn't justify the getting rid of uniforms altogether.
Let's use the scenario. If school uniforms were to be banned, Mr. Gordon, let's use the scenario. If school uniforms were to be banned, do you think that it would solve the anti-competitive behavior of school uniform suppliers with various schools?
I don't believe that it would have any significant effect. It might affect it in perhaps 5, 10, 20 schools, but remember we have got 25,000 schools, and I believe in the 24,900 of those schools there is no such collusionary practice. So no, I don't believe it would have any marked effect on the general situation in education and education access to our schools. And if that were happening, then I believe that the costs would go up. I was just comparing prices in the advertisements in the press over the weekend. And for instance, where you can buy a pair of shorts or a grey skirt for a young person at approximately 39, 45, 50 rand, the equivalent of the so-called civvy, the open dress that the young people would choose if they had free choice, is 99, 149. So immediately that goes up. We looked at shoes as well. School shoes cost in the region of 149 to 179, depending which stockist you go to. But if you have a look at the standard so-called casual shoes, those start at about 349 and go up as far as 799. So what is being suggested to us quite clearly is that the getting rid of the uniform will significantly increase the cost rather than decrease the cost, and that it may stop collusionary practices in a very, very small number of schools, but that it will not have a significant overall effect on the market.
So you are a proponent of a standard dress code, but as the governing body foundation, are you liaising then with the Department of Education to represent parents in relation to school uniform price fixing?
We haven't specifically gone in with the education department. We have taken it up very strongly with our member schools in the organization and pointed out to them the need to be aware of the belt tightening, the economic difficulties that are facing people. We also, as long ago as about a year ago, were in discussion with the Competition Commission. So we've been in on this from the ground floor. And we are certainly absolutely opposed to collusionary, illegal, or unfair enrichment practices. But what we are saying is that don't replace it with something worse, less effective, and also more expensive, because that is the danger, and that is the very strong possibility if we were to entirely try to ditch uniforms and ditch uniform stockists.
Tim, I'd like to thank you for your time joining us from our Cape Town studios.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
That was Tim Gordon, the CEO of the Governing Body Foundation, joining us there. Now, we're asking you that question today. That relates to school uniforms. Many of you are suffering today as a parent. Why is school uniform still necessary in our modern day South Africa? It's the 21st century, people. Do we still need it? That's the question we want to pose. You can let us know on the Twitter handle as well as on the Facebook page. You can also participate on the poll. That poll that is up there that shows that asks the question whether or not we still need it. There it is. Are school uniforms becoming unaffordable for you and me as parents? There you go. 80% of you are saying yes. There's 205 votes in. 20% are saying no. Those are probably the parents that are sending their children to private schools and don't have any uniforms. Eh? That could be. So, are school uniforms becoming unaffordable for parents? We'll take this up a notch just after the break with our next guest sitting here with us in studio, Professor Laura Rackpot. She's from UJ, joining us shortly.
And poverty did not deter Mpumi's success.
Being an orphan or coming from poverty or having seen what HIV and AIDS does to a person that you love takes nothing away from you. It means that you are part of a selective few who have had to face a very, very marginalized struggle.
Abuse is a lonely journey that needs compassion.
I came across as a very confident, ambitious person, but behind that mask was somebody who had serious anxiety problems, a person who had knots in their stomach continuously, a person who could be in company and would feel very lonely.
Being away from his birth country did not stop his hunger to succeed.
Boxing was the way out. Turning professional would give me an income. That was the solution to the problems I've had for so many years.
For more inspiring stories, join Bupulong every Friday at 17:30.
To uniform or not to uniform? Now that is the age-old question being asked around the globe. But how much of an impact does this have on our children's behavior and their performance at schools? And would removing a uniform really have a detrimental impact on those who cannot afford the niceties of life and clothes? To explore this, joining us now in studio is the educational psychologist, Professor Laura Rackpot from the University of Johannesburg. A very good morning to you, Professor, and
welcome.
Thank you.
Now, historically, if we can just go back, a uniform was adopted by those considered to be the elite, the colonialists that came into the country, the respected members of society, they called them. And we're now in the 21st century. Do we really still need uniforms for school children?
I think uniforms should not only be linked to an old colonialist kind of view. I think uniforms should also look at what does a uniform stand for in school in terms of a culture. It's a school culture.
just as any tribal or cultural background usually has some form of uniform or thing that they can identify with in terms of that specific culture, school is also a culture. So if I know that I'm going to attend a school or do a specific type of activity, which is school, it is good to identify myself also with a type of uniform that will put me into that situation and into that culture. I think it is also good for schools to be able to identify with a specific school's youngsters, to identify with a specific school. This is my school, I am proud of my school, I buy into my school and the culture of my school. I think taking uniforms away is something that is, uniforms are akin to us as humans. If you look at teenagers, they all want the newest Nikes. I don't want Nikes from last year, I want what's out now. So they will still tend to go towards a certain uniform, whether it's a uniform prescribed by the school or a uniform that any brand name prescribes. They will still want that. And I think it just levels the playing field for those kids who can't afford to wear a certain
There are those,
brand
though,
name.
that would argue that it's still very militaristic, that it puts children in a particular form, almost like prison, right? If we put them then in a uniform, does it perhaps then discipline them to a certain degree, as you indicated, that they feel part and parcel of a group?
I think with the idea of the uniform comes a certain decorum or a certain behavior that you think is expected from you. And I think that schools in culture in children from grade 1 onwards. You come into grade 1, you don't play anymore, this is what we do. We do play, but we also do school. And I think for us, why aren't we in studio today in our pajamas? You know, you tend to link certain ways of dressing with certain cultural activities. And I think that's what it helps towards discipline, definitely, yes.
But isn't it also then perhaps a sense of control?
Yes, but have you ever tried to discipline 45 little young kids in front of you? So a little bit of control in that way is not always a bad thing. It must just not be used as punishment.
Yeah.
And I think that is the difference. You know, parents paying exorbitant school fees for uniforms and being forced to buy from certain providers, I think that's going into punishment then. So it's always the balance that we need to look at in that.
Are there any pros to wearing a uniform for a school child? You talked about the group factor.
Yes. I think many children, especially adolescents, younger children to a certain degree, but when you go into pre-adolescence and adolescence, you identify with a group. So whatever helps you to identify with a group gets you in or out. So if you can't afford the clothes or you don't think that you have the brand name that puts you in with the group, whether we want to, that's why brand names sell, you know, because kids like to identify with a certain, puts them in a category. Now imagine if you do not have the money to put you into that specific category. You already maybe feel as an outcast in some other behavioral way. Now your uniform or the way that you dress or can afford to dress also puts you outside of the group. So I think it does help some children who can't afford other clothes, you know, and parents do, I know they complain about the uniform, but imagine if you had to buy brand names all the time, what the costs would be of that.
In developing nations, especially here in South Africa, some would say that a uniform perhaps might mask the inequality gap that we have between the rich and the poor. Would that be a sensible statement to make?
I think to a certain degree, yes. You know, because I may not be socioeconomically very on the high up on the ladder, but I can have my black school shoes that are clean every day. And if I sit next to a person that maybe can afford 3 pairs of black school shoes, they're still black school shoes. You know, so I can, as long as I clean my uniform and I get a certain sense of pride in that, I think there's more of an equality that comes with that.
And it also takes away that prejudice that other students might have, because you find this equilibrium then between you and me.
Yes, exactly. And that does not make me immediately feel inferior when I walk into a classroom, because now I feel that my dress is inferior to you. It's a leveler in that sense.
Now, if we take away uniforms and you find children coming in with different types of clothing and the latest Nikes, as you indicated, what would that lead to in our schools? Would there be chaos, you think?
It's difficult to say because there are many schools where children do not wear uniforms. I think the main thing is that that's again the dress code of the school, because many schools that don't have uniform still have a dress code. So the skirt can't be too short, the top can't be too low for young girls, etc. But it's a constant thing of monitoring that then. We must constantly say, no, you should not wear this, you know, and I think it just brings in more difficulty in terms of the general discipline in the school. Then if you just know what's the uniform, that's what you must wear, and that's what is accepted. I think it just makes it easier in terms of running a school in that way.
Now, others would argue that a uniform prevents us from indulging in our cultural traditions and of course, expressing ourselves in our unique styles. Would that be the case, you think, especially with children?
I think if you look at the workplace, would you necessarily, if you look around the studio or where you're working here in the building, would you know what someone's culture is? Do they come, they have a choice to wear whatever they want to work? Do they wear their traditional cultural clothing? Hardly ever, you know, so I think that point is moot. I think what you could say then is over the weekends you can wear your cultural dress if that's what your preference is.
And then just finally, Professor, removing uniforms in all schools, would that perhaps be a catalyst for change to the new modern-day South Africa, or not?
There's no research that will back that up, because if we look at the US, the majority of children don't wear uniforms to school. So there's a lot of research for uniform, there's a lot of research against uniform, as some of the views that you said now. But I think as a society that's generally, a lot of the people live in poverty and struggle to make ends meet. If we give affordable uniform that can also, children can wear the same uniform across different schools. So if I move, I still wear my grey pants and my white shirt. I might wear a tie or a jacket or a scarf that identifies with my school, but a standard uniform that's affordable from all the department stores. I think it actually helps parents after they have the initial cost.
Professor, thank you so much for your time and joining us here in studio.
It was wonderful.
Now, there you have it. Well, standard uniform, that was also mooted by the previous speaker. So what do you think? That's educational psychologist Professor Laura Rackpart giving us some insight into the psychology being in a uniform. Well, we'll take a break right now. We'll be back after that.
R1.4 billion was raised to build the institution. Additional funding came from ordinary South Africans.
It's been heartwarming to have seen the project from 2009 when the first sorting happened to see it today being completed. Indeed, this is going to be our benchmark going forward. It's just been incredible.
Jammeh has said in the past that only Allah can remove him from office, and once claimed he would rule the tiny riverside West African nation for 1 billion years.
We are going to win this election.
Even if we avoid a downgrade, we're still hovering very dangerously close to junk, and that'll of course affect markets next year.
Our markets are actually already punishing us for a downgrade that may or may not come.
Woods made a blistering start but eventually slumped to a 1 over par 73 and is 9 shots behind the leader and his compatriot JB Holmes.
You know, I just made some really, if you look at it, some really silly mistakes. Mistakes I don't normally make, but I hadn't played in a while, and you know, unfortunately I made those mistakes. I can clean that up.
Good
Good morning, welcome back. The time has just hit 11:43. My name is Kendall Mohammed and I've got your sports. Now, the year's opening slam, the Australian Open, has dished up some of the most unexpected results and some of the most scintillating tennis for some time. In both the men's and women's draw, the top seeds were sent packing even before they could get to the quarters, all on the same day. What drama. And just this morning, the Williams sisters, Serena and older sister Venus, took ownership of the show, waltzing into a final which, regardless which way the coin foils, will have a Williams as a champion. Joining me is our specialist SABC sports reporter, Liesel's uncle. Liesel, what a grand slam.
I don't know if you can script it better. It is just unbelievable. I mean, if you look at Dennis Isterman, the world number 117, let's start there. He beat Novak Djokovic very early on. He was in an accident a few years back, and people said to him, you will never be able to play tennis again, and look at him now. Wow. Then you have someone like Misha Zverev, who beat Andy Murray, the top seed. And Misha Zverev, just 2 years ago, was just like under the top 1,000 in the world. You have Mariana Lucic-Baroni. I don't think I have to tell you about her fairy tale. I think a lot of people in the world know what's happened to her. So with her, she lost this morning, but she reached the semi-finals.
I think some people would need a bit of a refresher because Lucic-Baroni, the last time she actually played was in 1999.
Not the last time she's played. She's played in between as well.
Right. The last time she actually stuck out and we actually saw her was then.
Exactly. And when she was still a teenager. But what was very interesting to me, Kendall, this morning is that they said by reaching the semi-final stage, she won something like $850,000 or something like that, which is more than she earned from 2000 to 2012. So she's earned more in the last 2 weeks than she's done for 12 years. But Lucic-Baroni, what a story. She took a selfie after the match.
Yeah, we saw that.
Serena applauded her. It was great sportsmanship, and she's done really, really well for herself.
Now, phenomenal. But now let's come to this morning, because when I woke up this morning, I was a little torn. I don't know what to expect. We had both Williams sisters playing in separate semi-finals, and it seemed as if a Williams final was on the cards, but we had Coco van der Weijg, and we also had a very strong chance that Lucic-Baroni would actually come out and do the deed against her opponent. But tell us about that.
Yeah, so I think as well it's a resurgence of not a resurgence, but the older players dominating, which I found quite interesting. But in any case, as you can see, Serena was absolutely on fire. She wants that 23rd Grand Slam singles title, and she wants to have that record behind her name. She wants to surpass Steffi Graf of Germany. But she was amazing. She was so strong this morning. Her defensive game, her serves. I know she's been struggling with her serves, and she did say after the match that she worked so hard on her serves, and she is a perfectionist. But Lucic-Baroni, I think she was mentally, the whole thing just took such a toll on her, and she wasn't a shadow of the player that she was earlier in the rounds. But Serena, absolutely amazing, and I'm so thrilled that she can actually go and play in the final on Saturday. There she is taking the selfie, and Serena being so happy for her. Yeah. Venus was absolutely, the experience came through, I think. Right. Coco van der Weijg was the youngest, at 25 years old. Venus, the oldest, at 36, and you can see what this means to her, this winning. I mean, the last time she advanced to the Melbourne final was in 2003. It's 14 years ago. Yeah. The last time she played in a final was in 2009 at Wimbledon, and she was just so incredibly happy. And now we have an all-Williams singles final. It's very exciting.
Talking about an all-Williams singles final, the 2009 Wimbledon final was against Serena, was it not?
It was.
And Serena won that one. And how do you think this one is going to play out? Before we talk about Federer and what's happened with him and Wawrinka, we've got about a minute and a half.
Okay, so I must admit that the Williams finals are not very exciting to me, because I think it's a very difficult thing for them to do. And after the match also they said, where's your family going to sit? Which box will they be in? Yeah. So I don't think maybe it's as exciting. They know each other so well, the tennis. But I think it's still awesome that a Williams will win it. I actually don't really care, but I think Serena's got the upper hand, I think. She's just so brilliant.
Right now we've got another very interesting match. We've got two Swiss against each other. We've got Wawrinka up against Roger Federer. And it seems as if Federer took the first set, 7-5. Very tight it was. Toe-to-toe, these two gentlemen were going in the very first set. And do you think Federer's got the edge on Wawrinka? Because this is Federer's clearest chance in a long while to the title.
Absolutely. Wawrinka hasn't beaten Federer on a hard court. It's only been on clay. Federer is, I think we're all holding, most of us are holding firms for him in any case. I mean, if he, like you said, if he doesn't do it this year, I don't know if he'll do it again because Murray's not there, Djokovic isn't there. But I think, you know, he knows Stan so well, and obviously Stan knows him so well and all of that. But I think, and I hope that Federer will win this and go through to the final. Interestingly enough, 2008 Wimbledon final, Venus versus Serena. 2008 Wimbledon final, men's singles, Roger and Rafa.
You know what? Andy Roddick was saying that a Roger and Rafa final will be one of the most amazing matches ever to be played in a Grand Slam final.
That's what I'm hoping for. But in any case, so Federer and Wawrinka are playing now, and tomorrow it's Grigor Dimitrov versus Rafa, of course.
Yes,
so tomorrow he's playing Rafa. I hope Rafa can do it.
Liesl, thank you so much. You know what? The passion that you bring to the tennis reports that you bring through shines through on screen. Thank you so much for having come through and helped us get to the bottom of all this.
Thanks, Kendall.
There you have it, Liesl's uncle, our specialist SABC sports reporter. And when I say specialist, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Tennis is her game. She's great at it. That's where we leave it. We'll be back tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp until midday to bring you more sports news as well as other news. Bye-bye.
Lesotho Queen Masela led Remembrance Sunday celebrations in the capital of Lesotho, Maseru.
This is the Makwanyane Square. It is a monument established to pay tribute to Basotho.